You think your grandparents served plain dinners because fancy ingredients weren't available? Think again. Those evening meals were acts of love and defiance, transforming scraps into suppers that held families together when everything else was falling apart. Let's dig into 100 cheap dinners our grandparents ate to survive. Homemade meatloaf, the best-kept secret for stretching a small amount of meat into a full meal. In hard times, buying enough ground beef for the whole family was a challenge, to say the least. But meatloaf came to the rescue. That makes it sound like a superhero. But in a way, it was. The trick was to add breadcrumbs, oats, or whatever filler you had in the house, mix it all up, and you've got yourself a meal that could feed many. Meatloaf was a sort of blank canvas for creative chefs. You could toss in onions, ketchup, or mustard, plus you could top it off with the famous ketchup glaze. The end result was a meal that felt satisfying, even though you'd sneakily cut the meat with cheaper ingredients. The beauty of meatloaf was that no two recipes were ever the same. Each household had its own version, depending on what they had in the pantry. And let's not forget the most important part, the leftovers. They were good the next day too. Some would say even better. You could slice it up for sandwiches or reheat it for another dinner. It was a comfort food at its finest. Cheap, simple, budget-friendly, and packed with flavor, so you forgot what it actually was. Hominy and bacon casserole offered hearty satisfaction with minimal ingredients, highlighting how resourcefulness defined many mid-century meals. Creamy canned hominy provided a naturally sweet base that absorbed the smoky flavor of crisp bacon bits sprinkled throughout. A light sauce of milk and butter bound everything together before baking, creating a dish with comforting richness despite its simplicity. Families often served it as a main course with a side of green vegetables or a slice of cornbread, making it a complete and inexpensive dinner. Hominy's long shelf life and low price made it a dependable pantry staple, while just a few strips of bacon added enough depth to please meat lovers without straining the budget. The casserole reheated beautifully, so leftovers were welcomed for quick lunches the next day. Its combination of smooth texture and smoky taste made it popular at potlucks and church gatherings where thrifty recipes were always appreciated. Hominy and bacon casserole remains a testament to how modest ingredients can deliver true comfort and memorable flavor when prepared with care and creativity. Grilled cheese and pineapple sandwiches were one of Grandma's best-kept secrets, the kind of meal that made you raise an eyebrow right before you fell in love with it. It started like any grilled cheese, with slices of bread and whatever cheese was available. But right before the second slice went on, she would place a canned pineapple ring right in the middle of the sandwich. Then it all went into the skillet with butter hissing underneath. The cheese melted, the pineapple softened, the bread crisped to a golden crunch. The end result? A sandwich that was both savory and sweet, crispy and juicy. It was like dinner and dessert in one bite, and it somehow worked better than anyone expected. She made it on Fridays, or on days when the pantry was almost bare, but the craving for something different was strong. The smell of warm pineapple and browned butter filled the house and lingered even after the dishes were done. Kids loved it. Grown-ups pretended they did not, until they asked for seconds. It was quick, clever, and full of unexpected joy. Just like her. Oven-baked drumsticks with paprika were one of the most approachable poultry dinners of the 1950s, offering flavor and affordability in every bite. Housewives coated chicken drumsticks with paprika and seasonings, then baked them until crisp on the outside and juicy inside. It was an easy recipe that delivered consistent results, even for busy families. Children loved picking up drumsticks with their hands, while adults appreciated that chicken was cheaper than beef or pork. The paprika provided a warm, smoky flavor that elevated a simple meal into something more memorable. Community cookbooks often listed baked chicken recipes as weeknight staples, and this version became a favorite for its balance of cost and taste. Drumsticks were often served with mashed potatoes or green beans, completing the kind of dinner that defined mid-century kitchens. Oven-baked drumsticks with paprika captured the essence of 1950s family cooking. Straightforward, budget-friendly, and deeply satisfying. Moving on to something more concrete, Johnny cakes. They could be whatever your heart desired, a main dish, a side dish, something sweet or something salty. They were true soldiers during the tough times. These cornmeal-based pancakes were a lifesaver for families looking to stretch their budgets. With just a few basic ingredients, cornmeal, water, and maybe a dash of salt if you were feeling fancy, you could whip up a batch of Johnny cakes that kept everyone fed without having to pull a bank job. Bread was often too expensive or hard to come by. Johnny cakes were the affordable alternative that could be made from cornmeal, which was widely available and cheap. These little golden cakes were versatile too. You could eat them plain, or drizzled with syrup if you were lucky to have it lying around the house. Johnny cakes were filling and could hold their own as the main course or side dish. Some people might say that they were a bit bland, but what did you expect? A gourmet meal in those times? Johnny cakes were the epitome of resourcefulness. Just cornmeal and water mixed together and fried up on a hot griddle. Simple? Yes. But when you're trying to make every penny count, Johnny cakes got the job done and kept hunger away. Mock chicken legs, or city chicken, as some called it, might be the cleverest trick rural cooks ever pulled. It looked like fried chicken. It even tasted close. But there was not a single feathered friend in sight. These were skewers of pork or veal, cubed and threaded like kebabs, then breaded and fried or baked until crispy and golden. They were meant to mimic chicken drumsticks for families who could not afford the real thing. And here is the kicker: they worked. In blind taste tests, folks swore it was chicken. That is how good these were. You might find them listed in old recipe cards as Sunday treats, dressed up with gravy and mashed potatoes, or served plain with pickles and bread. Kids loved them, adults appreciated the savings, and everyone respected the ingenuity. It was cooking with humor, practicality, and a little sleight of hand. These mock chicken legs turned less into more, and no one left the table disappointed. Green bean croquettes brought new life to leftover vegetables, turning them into crispy patties that satisfied even the pickiest eaters. Cooked green beans were mashed with breadcrumbs, a beaten egg, and a sprinkle of herbs, then shaped into small rounds and pan-fried until golden on the outside and soft within. This dish allowed thrifty homemakers to stretch a handful of beans into a full meal, pairing perfectly with a dollop of ketchup or a simple white sauce. Children loved the crunch, and parents appreciated the low cost and quick preparation time. Green bean croquettes also demonstrated the growing influence of European cooking techniques in American kitchens, where frying and breadcrumb coatings were becoming increasingly popular. Served alongside a salad or a scoop of mashed potatoes, they brought variety and texture to the dinner table without adding strain to the grocery budget. Their lasting charm lies in the way they prove that even the simplest leftovers can be turned into something special when treated with care and creativity. American Goulash Light was less of a recipe and more of a formula. Meat, pasta, and tomatoes in whatever shape you could get. Elbow macaroni was the go-to because it cooked fast and filled up the pot. Grandma would brown a little ground beef, drain off the grease, and toss it with stewed tomatoes straight from the can. No sauce, no simmering, no drama. Sometimes she added a bit of onion or garlic salt, but usually it was just whatever she had on hand. The pasta would soak up the tomato juice until it was soft and tangy, and the beef added just enough flavor to make it stick to your ribs. Served in bowls with a sprinkle of grated cheese, if you were lucky, it was dinner. Fast. It was not the baked casserole version you see in magazines. This was goulash stripped down to its bones, made for people who needed food on the table in 10 minutes or less. And the best part? It was good. Really good. No breadcrumbs, no baking dish, no long prep. Just one skillet, one spoon, and a whole lot of knowing what mattered. That is how Grandma cooked. Baked cod with Ritz cracker topping was a beloved fish dinner that felt indulgent without straining wallets. Fresh cod was placed in a baking dish, topped with crushed Ritz crackers mixed with butter and baked until golden and crisp. Housewives turned to this recipe when they wanted to serve seafood that looked elegant but required little effort. Children loved the crunchy topping, which masked the mild taste of the fish and made it more appealing. Adults appreciated the balance of thrift and presentation, since cod was affordable compared to other fish and crackers were always on hand. Community suppers often showcased this dish because it was easy to prepare in large batches while still impressing guests. It carried the comfort of baked casseroles while also hinting at sophistication, especially for families far from the coast who still wanted seafood on the table. Oven-baked cod with Ritz cracker topping stood as a perfect example of 1950s creativity, elevating basic ingredients into something memorable and satisfying. Cabbage and dumpling stew was what you made when the week was long, the weather was cold, and the pantry had more space than supplies. Cabbage, with its long shelf life and dependable bulk, was a farm family's best friend. Chop it up, throw it in a pot with a little salted water, and you were halfway to dinner. The dumplings were made from flour, eggs, and a bit of milk or water. Simple dough dropped right into the simmering pot to puff and soak up all the broth. If you had a ham bone or a bit of lard, it went in too, giving just enough richness to make it feel like more than boiled vegetables. It was not fancy, but it was filling. This dish found its way into American kitchens through immigrant traditions, especially German, Hungarian, and Polish families who settled in the Midwest. And it stuck around because it worked. You did not need meat to make it satisfying. Hamburger rice skillet pie demonstrated the 1960s knack for stretching a pound of meat to feed a crowd. Ground beef was cooked with onions, peppers, and a generous helping of cooked rice before being spread in a skillet or shallow casserole. A biscuit dough topping, brushed with milk for shine, transformed the humble filling into a pie that looked more luxurious than its ingredients suggested. By combining inexpensive rice with a small amount of meat, families could create a dish that was both hearty and economical, perfect for busy weeknights. The biscuit layer soaked up the savory juices as it baked, giving each slice a comforting blend of flavors and textures. Many homemakers wrote this recipe on index cards to keep near the stove because it could be made entirely from pantry staples. Children enjoyed the fluffy crust and mild seasoning, while parents appreciated how it filled plates without emptying wallets. This skillet pie remained a dependable favorite for decades because it embodied practicality without sacrificing taste or warmth at the dinner table. But Sloppy Joes had already earned their place in the American kitchen by the time Grandma figured out how to make them faster. Instead of hamburger buns, she grabbed slices of toast, whatever white sandwich bread was left in the bread box. Ground beef got tossed into the skillet with a little onion, then drowned in a quick mix of ketchup, mustard, and a pinch of sugar if you had it. No special seasonings, no packets, no fuss. Once the mixture was bubbling, it got spooned right over the toast and served just like that, open-faced, hot, and ready to fall apart in your hands. That was half the fun. It dripped, it stained your fingers, and it always tasted better the messier it was. This was a dinner for families who were too tired to sit proper but still wanted to eat together. It was loud, quick, and honest. And even though it came from a time of tight belts and short patience, it tasted like something you might pay good money for at a diner today. That is the thing about Sloppy Joe toast. It always fed more than just your stomach. The meatball and onion gravy skillet was one of the most comforting one-pan meals of the 1950s. Made with inexpensive ground beef rolled into meatballs and simmered in brown gravy with onions. Housewives loved it because it required only a handful of ingredients yet tasted filling and satisfying. Served over mashed potatoes or bread, it became a complete dinner that could feed an entire family without stretching the budget too far. Children enjoyed the rich flavor of the gravy, which made even plain mashed potatoes taste special. Adults appreciated the way this dish transformed economical ground beef into something hearty and flavorful. Cookbooks often recommended it as a weeknight staple, since it could be made quickly on the stovetop without heating the oven. The meatball skillet reflected the practicality of mid-century cooking, which emphasized resourceful ways to feed families well. For many, it became a familiar part of the dinner table, a simple but memorable dish that carried both comfort and thrift in every bite. Navy bean soup was one of the Depression-era lifesavers, especially when it came to those government surplus food boxes handed out to families in need. In times when options were limited, a bag of Navy beans came in hand and saved the day. These little white beans might not look like much, but when simmered in a big pot with some water and maybe a bit of ham or bacon, they transformed into a soup of your dreams that could feed a family for days. Navy beans are packed with protein, and they could fill you up and leave you satisfied, which was exactly what families in need were craving in those hard times when meat was scarce and expensive. The longer it simmered, the better it tasted, which meant you could make a big batch on Monday and still be eating it on Thursday, with the taste just getting better and better. Even with minimal ingredients, navy bean soup delivered with the taste. It was humble, yes, no one can disagree on that, but it did what it had to do. Plus, if you had some bread or crackers, this dish could fill you up with warmth and make those hard days a bit more bearable. Homemade sausage cakes with sorghum biscuits were the kind of meal that made morning chores feel just a little bit easier. The sausage was not store-bought. It was made by hand, right at home. Ground pork seasoned with salt, pepper, sage, and sometimes a hint of crushed red pepper. You shaped it into thick patties and pan-fried them until the edges crisped and the centers stayed juicy. On their own, they were satisfying. But paired with sorghum biscuits, that was something else. Sorghum syrup, sticky and dark, got mixed right into the biscuit dough or drizzled on top after baking. The sweetness cut the saltiness of the sausage perfectly, creating a balance that modern breakfasts just do not have. It was a meal for slow mornings, family gatherings, and cold days when you needed something hearty to start off right. These recipes lived in the backs of family cookbooks, sometimes handwritten in fading pencil. They were not flashy or fussy, just smart, comforting, and full of flavor. You did not need a restaurant. You just needed a skillet, some good sausage, and enough sorghum to leave your fingers sticky. Zucchini tomato layer. Bake turned overflowing summer gardens into a warm and colorful family meal that fit any budget. Thin slices of zucchini were alternated with canned tomatoes inside a buttered casserole dish, sprinkled lightly with breadcrumbs and a handful of grated cheese. As it baked, the vegetables released their juices, blending with the cheese to create a savory sauce that required no extra effort. This dish became a staple during peak harvest months, when zucchini was plentiful and nearly free from backyard gardens or neighborhood swaps. Home cooks appreciated how easily it adapted to what they had on hand, allowing the addition of fresh herbs or a scattering of leftover rice to make it more filling. Served hot with crusty bread, it offered a complete vegetarian supper that satisfied even the most dedicated meat eaters. The simple preparation, bright flavors, and low cost made it a dependable recipe that graced countless 1960s dinner tables, celebrating the abundance of late summer produce while keeping grocery bills comfortably low for hardworking families. Peanut butter and bacon sounds like a dare today, but to Grandma, it was just Tuesday lunch. This was a sandwich born in the tail end of the Great Depression and carried proudly into the next decade by people who knew how to stretch every ingredient. She would fry up strips of bacon until they crackled, drain them on the same paper towel she used all week, then lay them across a thick spread of peanut butter on white sandwich bread. That was it. No lettuce, no tomato, no fancy mayonnaise. Just salt, fat, protein, and speed. Kids loved the crunch. Grown-ups loved how it filled you up without burning through the grocery budget. And for something so strange-sounding, it just worked. The warmth of the bacon softened the peanut butter slightly, and the two came together like old friends who had nothing in common but always got along. Sometimes she would add a second slice of bread, but often it was open-faced and served cold. It was portable, practical, and surprisingly satisfying. And in homes where time was short and mouths were many, that counted for everything. You might laugh at it now, but one bite would probably bring it all back. Creamed chicken over rice was one of the richest but most practical dinners served in the 1950s, making use of milk, flour, and a small portion of chicken. Housewives cooked chicken pieces in a creamy white sauce, stretching a little meat into a dish that could feed many. Served over rice, it became a filling meal that was both comforting and economical. Children enjoyed its smooth, mild flavor, which felt indulgent compared to plainer dishes. Adults appreciated the warmth and heartiness it brought to the dinner table, especially in colder months. Diners and cafeterias also served versions of creamed chicken, showing how widespread and beloved it became. It represented the mid-century style of cooking that relied on basic ingredients but transformed them through technique and thrift. creamed chicken over rice was practical, budget-friendly, and full of nostalgia for families who grew up with its creamy taste and simple presentation on weekday evenings. While on the topic of soup, let's not forget to mention onion soup. And since it is fall and fall is the soup-making season, maybe you'll get an idea or two on what to make for your next dinner. The onion soup was proof that even the humblest ingredients could make a delicious meal. In case you didn't know, when you're working on a tight budget, onions become your best mates. They were widely available and quite cheap at the time, so they were the go-to vegetable in hard times. When you mix a few onions and some broth, even if it's just water and a bouillon cube, you'll get yourself a soup that's rich in flavor but light on your wallet. The thing that makes onion soup such a classic and timeless meal is its simplicity. Though caramelizing onions takes a bit of time and patience, they add a depth of flavor that makes you forget you're eating something as simple as soup. Once they hit that sweet golden spot, there's no coming back. With just a few ingredients, you can create something that feels gourmet, even when times are lean. But we can't forget the bread and cheese. No onion soup is complete without them. Traditionally, a slice of bread and a sprinkle of cheese are broiled on top. But even without this fancy finish, onion soup remains a delicacy of this time. What fascinates me about onion soup is that it manages to make an ingredient such as an onion the star of the show, making it into a bowl of comfort that feels like a splurge, even though it is not. Onion and bacon Johnny cakes were the kind of meal that slipped in quietly and stole the show. Made from cornmeal batter poured straight onto a hot skillet, Johnny cakes were the backbone of many rural diets. But adding fried onions and chopped bacon took them from humble to unforgettable. The onions were slow cooked until golden, then folded into the batter with crispy bits of bacon. Each cake hit the griddle with a hiss and came out with browned edges and a fluffy center. You could eat them plain with syrup or next to a bowl of greens or beans. Some families made them small, like pancakes. Others spread them wide like a flatbread. Either way, they were always satisfying. In a time when flour could run out and yeast was hard to come by, cornmeal was king. And the addition of bacon and onion made the most basic meal feel warm, special, and a little bit indulgent. These Johnny cakes were dinner, breakfast, and everything in between. You did not need a reason to make them. Just a skillet, some grease, and a little bit of whatever you had left in the fridge. Savory oatmeal bake proved that oats could be far more than a breakfast cereal, and that inexpensive pantry staples could hold their own at supper time. Rolled oats were mixed with diced onions, shredded cheese, beaten eggs, and a dash of black pepper, then baked until the top formed a golden crust. The result was a hearty loaf with a texture similar to meatloaf, but without the expense of beef. This dish allowed families to stretch their budgets while still offering a warm and filling dinner that paired well with a simple green salad or sliced tomatoes from the backyard garden. Cooks loved that the recipe welcomed additions like leftover vegetables or small bits of ham, making it an adaptable way to clear the refrigerator. Children often enjoyed the mild, nutty flavor, and leftovers could be sliced and reheated for breakfast the next morning. It embodied the frugal creativity of 1960s kitchens, where a bag of oats and a little cheese could become a main course worth serving to guests without apology. There was something almost ceremonial about pan-fried potatoes and onions with an egg on top. Grandma would cube the potatoes, chop the onions, and let them sizzle in a cast-iron skillet until they were browned and crispy. The smell alone could carry through the whole house. At the very end, she would crack an egg right into the center and let it cook sunny side up, the yolk just soft enough to run a little when you cut into it. No meat, no toast, just 3 simple ingredients that together felt like more than enough. This was dinner for lean weeks, meatless Fridays, or long stretches between paychecks. The potatoes filled you up, the onions gave it flavor, and the egg brought everything together. It was hearty, honest, and completely satisfying. Served in a bowl or straight from the skillet, it made the kind of meal that slowed you down and reminded you to be grateful, even if all you had was a sack of potatoes and a few eggs left in the carton. These were meals that came from resourcefulness, not recipes, and somehow that always tasted better. Fried pork cutlets offered families the crispy texture of fried meat, without the mess or expense of deep frying. Housewives coated thin slices of pork in seasoned crumbs, placed them on baking sheets and baked until golden. The result was tender meat with a crisp crust that felt indulgent yet practical. Children enjoyed the crunchy coating, while adults appreciated that the dish used inexpensive cuts of pork. It became especially popular in community cookbooks, where recipes emphasized thrift and convenience. Oven frying also fit neatly into the mid-century shift toward efficiency in the kitchen, as busy families embraced quicker, cleaner methods. Served with mashed potatoes or vegetables, oven-fried pork cutlets made for a complete meal that was easy to prepare on a weeknight. The dish reflected the balance of comfort and practicality that defined 1950s cooking, showing how everyday ingredients could be transformed into something satisfying without stretching the household budget. While we're on the topic of rice, my personal favorite, rice pudding. A sweet reminder that nothing should go to waste, especially not leftover rice. In the era of the Great Depression, where every rice grain was counted, families found a way to turn yesterday's leftover dinner into today's sweet dessert. Rice pudding became the ultimate budget-friendly treat, transforming something simple into something comforting and sweet with just a little sugar, milk, and a dash of cinnamon if you were feeling particularly fancy. I know leftover rice seems kind of blah, but once it simmers into something that looks and smells like pudding, you'll forget what you were even talking about. Plus, it was an easy way to turn ingredients you had into something new, which saved you money and a trip to the store. It felt like a real treat even in lean times, and that's why it was so popular among families. A warm bowl of rice pudding could brighten up the end of any meal, turning frugality into a moment of indulgence. So even though it started as a way to cut food waste, it stayed a family favorite that warmed up even the coldest hearts in those freezing times. Beef heart with onion gravy and parsley potatoes is not something you see on menus now, but once it was the sign of a cook who knew exactly what they were doing. The heart was cleaned, sliced, and braised low and slow until it turned tender, something between steak and liver, but milder and more filling. Meanwhile, onions were caramelized in the same pan, and flour was added to the drippings to make a rich brown gravy that carried the essence of every bite. Served with boiled parsley potatoes, soft on the inside, green-flecked and buttery on the outside, it became a full, well-rounded meal. The kind of thing that felt like you were eating high on the hog, even though it came from one of the cheapest cuts. Beef heart was never waste, not in a household that respected animals, effort, and food. And onion gravy? That was how you stretched flavor into something worth remembering. You did not need steak to eat well. You just needed time, care, and a willingness to work with what others left behind. That was the farm kitchen way. Raisin rice. Pilaf proved that a meatless dinner could still feel special and satisfying when handled with care. White rice was simmered slowly with a bit of butter until each grain was tender, then tossed with plump raisins that had been soaked in warm water to bring out their natural sweetness. A pinch of cinnamon or nutmeg added gentle spice, turning plain rice into a fragrant dish that filled the kitchen with an inviting aroma. Many 1960s households served this pilaf as a main course on nights when meat was too expensive, or saved it for church suppers where a simple vegetarian option was welcome. It paired beautifully with a crisp green salad or a side of baked apples, creating a balanced meal from inexpensive ingredients. Leftovers reheated well for breakfast with a drizzle of honey or a splash of milk. The dish showed how a few pantry staples could stretch a grocery budget and proved that even the simplest ingredients could deliver comfort and a hint of elegance at the dinner table. Pork chops with apples on toast was one of Grandma's best fancy in 5 minutes tricks. She would take a thin cut of pork, season it with salt and pepper, and pan-fry it in butter until golden brown and just cooked through. Meanwhile, she would warm up canned or stewed apples, sometimes spiced with cinnamon or cloves. A thick slice of toast would go down on the plate first, then the pork chop, and finally a generous spoonful of those sweet, soft apples on top. It looked like something you would get in a country diner, but it took less than 10 minutes in her kitchen. The toast soaked up the juices. The pork brought the savory. The apples added just enough sweetness to make it feel special. No one called it gourmet, but no one left a bite behind either. It was a clever mix of pantry staples and leftover odds and ends, dressed up just enough to make you sit a little straighter at the table. And it reminded you. Even a 10-minute dinner could feel like something worth slowing down for. Chop with apples and onions was one of the most beloved sweet and savory pairings of the 1950s, frequently appearing in community cookbooks. Housewives pan-fried pork chops until golden, then simmered them with sliced apples and onions for a flavorful contrast. The apples softened into sweetness, while the onions added depth, creating a balanced dish that felt both rustic and refined. Children often enjoyed the sweet notes of the apples, which made the meal more appealing. Adults appreciated its simplicity and the way it elevated an inexpensive cut of pork into something memorable. It became a fall favorite, especially when apples were in season and easy to find. The dish reflected the era's tendency to blend fruit with meats, creating combinations that felt home-style yet slightly special. Pork chop with apples and onions stood out as an example of how American families in the 1950s used seasonal ingredients to create comforting meals that could stretch budgets without sacrificing flavor. When fresh veggies were hard to come by, this simple, affordable dish made its way onto many kitchen tables. Creamed peas on toast. Yuck! Sounds terrible to me, but maybe some of you will disagree. In hard times, this was the go-to meal for families looking for something hearty without draining the pantry. Canned peas, some butter, flour, and milk, and you had yourself a creamy sauce that could turn a humble slice of toast into a meal. I know it doesn't sound glamorous, but creamed peas on toast were the purest form of comfort. You didn't need fancy ingredients or hours of prep time. Toss the peas in a quick white sauce, pour it over toast, and voila, dinner is served. It was filling and warm, with just the right amount of creamines to make you forget that it was actually a can of peas and a piece of toast. Creamed peas on toast came with a great bonus. It was quick to prepare, making it ideal for those nights when you were hungry but didn't have much to work with. It won't win you any culinary awards, but creamed peas on toast was a no-fuss comfort food that got the job done. Celery and cheese soufflé brought elegance to an inexpensive vegetable that most people considered only a snack or soup ingredient. Finely chopped celery was sautéed with a bit of butter and folded into a fluffy base of beaten eggs and grated cheese before being baked until the top rose and browned. Despite its sophisticated appearance, the ingredients were simple and affordable, making it a popular choice for dinner parties on a budget. The soufflé delivered a gentle crunch from the celery against the airy texture of the eggs, surprising guests who expected something plain. Because the recipe relied on pantry staples like milk, eggs, and a small amount of cheese, it fit perfectly into the frugal cooking philosophy of the time. Home cooks loved that it felt fancy without requiring costly ingredients or specialized equipment. Served with a crisp salad or a slice of toasted bread, this dish turned an ordinary evening into a special occasion and demonstrated how a humble vegetable could take center stage in a memorable meal. Leftover meat sandwiches with gravy dip were Sunday's second chance. After the roast was done and the big meal was over, Grandma would wrap up the meat and save the drippings. By Monday night, those cold slices went onto sandwich bread, sometimes plain, sometimes toasted, and dipped into reheated gravy like it was a 5-star French dip. No one called it leftovers, they called it dinner. The meat did not need to be warm, the gravy did the work. It softened the bread, wrapped the roast in warmth, and turned what might have been a dry slice of beef into something worth remembering. Some families used pork, others used ham. It did not matter. What mattered was that it was fast, smart, and made yesterday's meal last just a little longer. Grandma was good at that. Fricassee with dumplings was a frugal yet comforting dish that stretched poultry into a full family meal. Housewives simmered chicken pieces in a light gravy, then dropped flour dumplings into the pot to soak up the flavor. The dumplings were inexpensive to make but filling, turning a few cuts of chicken into enough servings for everyone. Children enjoyed the soft, pillowy dumplings, while adults valued how the meal was both hearty and practical. It was the kind of recipe that worked well during leaner weeks, when a single bird had to last across several dinners. Cookbooks of the 1950s often promoted fricassee as a balanced option, pairing protein with starch in one pot. Community gatherings also embraced it, since the dish could be stretched easily by increasing the number of dumplings. Chicken fricassee with dumplings stood as an example of resourcefulness, showing how simple ingredients could become a meal that felt complete, comforting, and satisfying without requiring much expense. Starting off strong with peanut butter soup. Yes, you heard me right, peanut butter soup. This dish shows just how creative some people were at that time. How could someone even get that idea? You might be wondering. Well, allow me to explain. In the Great Depression era, meat had become quite expensive to bring home. Stretching the budget had become a daily challenge, but peanut butter stepped in. It was rich in protein and full of flavor. This simple ingredient, transformed into a hearty soup, could feed the entire family without breaking the bank. I know it sounds weird. A soup made out of the same peanut butter you'd usually spread on toast. It seems unusual, but when times were tough, it was a genius way to get in some much-needed protein. I don't know about you, but I would definitely try it. It has a bit of charm. A touch of sweetness here, a hint of savory there, and boom! There you have a soup that will keep you fed and happy. It was a good way to use up any odds and ends you had lying around the house. Some onions, peas, rice, or potatoes. Anything you had would serve well once it touched that peanut butter heaven. If you grew up near a farmhouse or ever stepped foot inside a cold kitchen with the smell of navy beans and salted pork hanging in the air, then you know exactly what we are talking about. Dutch oven ham and bean supper was not just a dish, it was a whole day's labor packed into one heavy pot. You would soak your beans overnight, chop up whatever leftover ham bone you had stashed from last week's dinner, and toss in onions, garlic, and black pepper like it was the last flavor on earth. It simmered all afternoon, and the longer it cooked, the better it got. The ham hocks melted into the broth, the beans thickened into velvet, and the smell wrapped around the house like a wool blanket. It was especially loved during colder months, when heat and meat were both in short supply. And if there was any left the next day, which there rarely was, you could slap it between two thick pieces of cornbread and have yourself a meal all over again. Vegetable curry stew introduced a mild touch of international flavor to American kitchens while staying firmly in the realm of affordable comfort food. Potatoes, carrots, onions, and canned chickpeas simmered slowly with a gentle dusting of curry powder, filling the house with a warm, spiced aroma that felt both new and familiar. The recipe was flexible enough to accept any vegetables on hand, making it ideal for gardeners or thrifty shoppers. During the 1960s, when interest in global flavors was growing, this stew offered a budget-friendly way to explore something different without leaving the home kitchen. Served with plain rice or a slice of crusty bread, it delivered a complete protein and plenty of satisfying texture. Families discovered that the spices brightened otherwise simple ingredients, proving that excitement at the dinner table did not require expensive meats or specialty imports. Vegetable curry stew stands as a delicious example of how mid-century cooks embraced fresh ideas while still practicing the frugality and adaptability that defined their daily meals. Egg noodles with butter and garlic salt were Grandma's way of saying, "I know we are broke, but I will still feed you something warm." Boil the noodles, drain them fast, and throw in a chunk of butter while they were still steaming. Then came the garlic salt. Never garlic powder, never fresh cloves. Garlic salt was always the trick. Just a few shakes, stirred in with a wooden spoon, and the whole bowl came to life. It was buttery, salty, and smelled like comfort. You could eat it straight or add peas, chopped ham, or a sprinkle of Parmesan if you had any. But it did not need much. This was a meal that expected nothing and gave everything. It filled the house with warmth and the table with quiet. There was no story behind it, no secret ingredient, no hand-me-down recipe, just butter, garlic salt, and thyme. Sometimes that was all you needed. Stuffed bell peppers with rice and tomato sauce were one of the most colorful and practical dinners of the 1950s, turning simple ingredients into a family feast. Green bell peppers were hollowed out, filled with a mixture of rice, ground beef, and onion, and then topped with tangy tomato sauce. Housewives loved this recipe because it was flexible. Leftover rice or vegetables could be worked in to stretch the filling further. Children liked the novelty of eating food served inside a vegetable, while adults appreciated its hearty taste. The peppers baked slowly in the oven, filling kitchens with a savory aroma that promised a warm meal. Many community cookbooks highlighted stuffed peppers as a reliable option for busy weeknights or potluck gatherings. The dish reflected the balance of thrift and presentation that defined mid-century cooking, using inexpensive staples in a way that looked impressive. Stuffed bell peppers became a dinner table favorite because they were nourishing, frugal, and just different enough to feel special without costing much at all. Vegetable pot pie was proof that you didn't need meat to make a satisfying meal. When times were tough and the meat was either too pricey or just plain unavailable, families turned to the next best thing: vegetables. Awful alternative for all of us who hate veggies, but you had to do what you had to do just to get by. The humble pot pie, traditionally packed with chicken or beef, took a vegetable-only turn during the Great Depression. It consisted of hearty vegetables like potatoes, carrots, peas, and some onions. Vegetable pot pie was a filling, flavorful dish that still gave you that comforting feeling of a homemade meal. And nobody here can even imagine what that must have felt like. When all you ate were just scraps of whatever you could find, getting a vegetable pot pie must have felt like getting a roasted steak. Plus, it was a great way to use up whatever was in the garden or on sale at the market. No meat? No problem. Those veggies could stand their ground. Cooking a vegetable pot pie wasn't only about stretching the budget, it was also about creativity. You could throw in whatever comes to mind and call it dinner. If you, by some miraculous chance, got any canned tuna, that would go in there also. And let's be honest, upon cracking open that golden crust, it didn't matter what lay inside. It only mattered that you had food on the table. Sorghum-glazed pork chops with skillet apples might sound fancy now, but they began in modest kitchens that had never even seen a restaurant. Sorghum syrup was the sweetener of choice before white sugar became widely available. Thick like molasses but mellow in flavor, it paired beautifully with pork. Chops were seared in cast iron, glazed with sorghum and vinegar. While they finished cooking, sliced apples went into the same pan, soaking up the glaze and softening into sweet, sticky bites. This was celebration food. Pork wasn't always around, but when it was, you made it count. That glaze gave it a finger-licking shine that made even cheap cuts feel special. Some added cinnamon, others spooned the apples over grits. The goal was always the same: stretch the good stuff and waste nothing. These kinds of combinations, sweet, savory, tender, crisp, weren't born in test kitchens. They came from lived experience, from families making magic with what they had. Buttermilk potato pancakes were a beloved solution for leftover mashed potatoes and a shining example of kitchen thrift in mid-century America. Cold mashed potatoes were combined with tangy buttermilk, a beaten egg, and a bit of flour to create a batter that fried up into golden cakes with crisp edges and fluffy centers. Served hot from the griddle, these pancakes paired beautifully with applesauce, sour cream, or a simple sprinkle of salt and pepper. The recipe offered a new life to yesterday's potatoes, ensuring that nothing in the kitchen went to waste. Families welcomed the comforting aroma that filled the house as the pancakes cooked, making even an ordinary weeknight feel special. They were hearty enough to stand alone as supper, but also worked well alongside a small slice of ham or a bowl of vegetable soup. Easy to make and quick to cook, these pancakes became a regular part of many 1960s dinner rotations and remain a reminder that frugality can be delicious when handled with care and creativity. Creamed peas on buttered toast was one of those meals that whispered instead of shouted. It never tried to impress anyone. It was made for quiet nights, empty fridges, and long weeks. Grandma would melt a little butter in a pan, add canned peas, sometimes drained, sometimes not, and stir in milk and a bit of flour or cornstarch to thicken it. Salt, pepper, maybe a dash of sugar if the peas were too sharp. Then she would ladle the warm, creamy mix over thick slices of buttered toast. It was soft, it was mild, it was the edible version of a warm blanket. Nobody bragged about it, and no one ever asked for seconds out loud, but the plate was always clean by the end. It was a meal that held your hand, quietly filled you up, and gave you the strength to keep going. In some homes, it was the only hot food all week, and even if you had fancier ingredients or a longer grocery list, you still came back to this because it made you feel like a kid again. Just peas and bread and thyme. That was more than enough. Stuffed meatloaf with hard-boiled eggs was a showpiece dinner that remained budget-friendly while adding visual appeal. Housewives prepared the meatloaf mixture of ground beef, breadcrumbs, and seasonings, then placed hard-boiled eggs in the center before baking. When sliced, each portion revealed a striking cross-section with egg in the middle, making it both practical and eye-catching. Children enjoyed the surprise of seeing eggs inside their meatloaf, while adults appreciated the creativity of the dish. Despite its flair, it used only inexpensive ingredients, keeping it accessible to families watching their budgets. Community cookbooks often promoted it as a recipe that could impress guests without requiring expensive cuts of meat. It reflected the era's love for presentation, where even everyday meals were arranged to look appealing. Stuffed meatloaf with eggs stood as proof that thrift and creativity could go hand in hand, giving families a dinner centerpiece that felt special without costing much. Staying on the theme of no waste or zero waste, whatever you prefer to call it, we've got ourselves split pea soup with ham. When money was tight and meat was a luxury, even the humble ham bone found new life as the star of this hearty dish. Toss it into a pot of split peas, and you've got yourself a soup that could feed the whole family for days. The magic of the soup wasn't in the peas, but in the leftover ham bone, which gave the soup that smoky, rich flavor you could ask for without actually needing any meat. That right there is kitchen creativity at its finest, bringing out every bit of goodness out of something that might have otherwise been thrown away. As the peas simmer and break down, the ham bone starts working its magic and releases all the flavors into the broth. If you were one of the lucky ones, you would catch a few small bits of meat still clinging to it. But never mind if you didn't, the bone still did its job. Stuffed peppers with wild rice and scrapple were the kind of dish that turned odds and ends into something that looked presentable. You started with green bell peppers, fat ones if you could find them, and sliced off the tops. The filling was hearty. Wild rice brought chew, while scrapple added that gritty, meaty richness you could not fake. Scrapple, made from pork scraps, cornmeal, and spices, was often looked down on today, but once considered resourceful. When mixed with rice and maybe a spoonful of tomatoes or chopped onion, it filled those peppers to the brim. Baked until the peppers softened and browned, they came out looking like a treat even if they cost next to nothing. Sometimes they were topped with breadcrumbs, other times just left plain, but they were always filling and tasted like fall on a plate. It was a perfect example of how farmers stretched what they had and made something beautiful. It might not be in modern cookbooks, but it held its own at the dinner table. Beet and potato hash celebrated color and economy in equal measure, offering a hearty skillet meal from two of the most affordable vegetables around. Diced beets and potatoes were pan-fried with onions and a bit of oil, or leftover drippings until the edges turned golden and crisp. The beets added a deep ruby hue that stained the potatoes with a cheerful pink, making the dish as attractive as it was filling. A sprinkle of vinegar or a dollop of sour cream brought brightness to each bite, proving that frugal cooking could still deliver vibrant flavor. This hash was often served as a meatless main course or topped with a poached egg for extra protein, making it ideal for households watching their grocery spending. Gardeners loved it because it used ingredients that stored well through winter, ensuring a dependable dinner even when fresh produce was scarce. Beet and potato hash remains a classic example of how mid-century cooks turned basic staples into something comforting, flavorful, and visually striking without spending more than a few coins. Cabbage and noodle skillet, often called haluski style, was a dish that showed the strong influence of immigrant traditions on mid-century American cooking. Housewives fried chopped cabbage in butter until tender and slightly sweet, then tossed it with noodles and onions. It was incredibly simple yet surprisingly hearty, providing comfort with only a few inexpensive ingredients. Children enjoyed the mild taste, while adults appreciated how filling and affordable it was. The dish often appeared at church suppers in areas with large Eastern European communities, eventually spreading into broader American cooking. It represented the way immigrant recipes blended seamlessly into mid-century kitchens, becoming everyday staples. Housewives leaned on it when money was scarce, since cabbage and noodles could be bought cheaply and stretched across several meals. Cabbage and noodle skillet was proof that even the humblest foods could carry warmth, tradition, and satisfaction, making it a quiet but memorable part of 1950s dinner tables. While we're on the subject of vegetables, we must mention the classic ragout of vegetables. Ragout of vegetables is a French-inspired stew that is the culinary equivalent of throwing everything together and hoping for the best. Out of all the dishes mentioned, this one is probably the most versatile and surprising. You never truly know what leftovers you have lying around the house, so once you gather them all together in a stew, who knows what you'll make? A few carrots with slight discoloration, a half-rotten tomato, a potato you don't even remember buying. That is what you're working with. But once you chop them all up and throw them in a pot with some broth and herbs, you'll create a bubbly stew in no time. The great thing about ragout is that it is entirely customizable. No two batches will ever be the same, and it's a great way to practice cooking and feel like a gourmet chef. Hey, Gordon Ramsay wasn't born a professional. So next time your vegetable drawer fills up with old veggies, don't just toss them out, but rather make yourself some old-fashioned ragout. Milk gravy over fried salt pork might sound simple today, but it once ruled the breakfast and supper tables across countless rural households. Salt pork was cheap, shelf-stable, and salty enough to flavor just about anything. You would slice it thin, fry it crisp, and leave behind a pan full of drippings that could start 100 meals. For gravy, you would whisk in a bit of flour, pour in some milk, fresh if you had it, and stir until smooth. Pepper was your friend here. It added just enough bite to balance the richness. This was poured over everything from biscuits to mashed potatoes, even wilted greens. But more often than not, you served it with whatever you had, leftover bread, fried apples, or even boiled vegetables. It was not a luxury, but it was beloved. That gravy was the kind of thing that stuck with you, literally and figuratively. It coated your plate and stayed in your memory. In a world without fast food or grocery stores down the block, this kind of meal brought people together at the table and made the most of every ounce of effort. Barley and mushroom gravy bowl brought hearty texture and deep flavor to the dinner table using ingredients that cost only pennies per serving. Pearl barley was simmered until tender and spooned into bowls, then generously topped with a thick mushroom gravy made from sautéed onions, sliced mushrooms, and a splash of milk or broth. The barley's nutty chewiness paired perfectly with the savory gravy, creating a meal that was both comforting and surprisingly filling. This dish proved that meat was not necessary to achieve a rich, satisfying flavor, making it popular among families seeking economical vegetarian options. Barley stored well and cooked in bulk, so a single bag could supply multiple meals over the week. The recipe also welcomed leftovers, allowing home cooks to add bits of vegetables or herbs on hand without increasing the cost. Served with a simple green salad, barley and mushroom gravy bowl became a quiet star of thrifty 1960s kitchens, showcasing how whole grains and careful seasoning could create a dinner that felt indulgent despite its humble origins. Rice with butter and soy sauce was one of those dinners that made the most out of almost nothing. After the war, a lot of homes had rice in the pantry and not much else. Grandma would boil a pot, fluff it with a fork, and then stir in a generous pat of butter and just enough soy sauce to give it color and salt. It was not traditional, it was not fancy, but it did the job. The butter gave it richness, the soy sauce gave it depth, and together they turned a plain grain into something worth sitting down for. You could eat it on its own or serve it beside scrambled eggs, canned vegetables, or the last spoonful of meat from the night before. It was a filler, yes, but a warm, flavorful one that somehow tasted better the more you needed it. This dish was quiet comfort, the kind that showed up when no one else did and still managed to make you feel full. And that is why it stayed in rotation, long after things got better. Sometimes the best meals were the ones that asked for the least. Baked ham with mustard brown sugar glaze was the centerpiece of countless 1950s holiday tables, serving as both a celebratory dinner and a source of days' worth of leftovers. Housewives coated the ham in a glaze made from mustard and brown sugar, baking it until the surface caramelized into a sweet, tangy crust. The aroma alone filled homes with anticipation. Children loved the sugary glaze, while adults appreciated how the ham could be sliced thin for sandwiches or diced into casseroles after the feast. It was practical luxury, a dish that felt festive without being wasteful. Many families associated it with Christmas, Easter, or Sunday gatherings when extended relatives came together around the table. Cookbooks and advertisements often promoted glazed ham as a symbol of prosperity in the post-war years. Baked ham with mustard brown sugar glaze became an enduring tradition of the 1950s, embodying both the celebratory spirit of the era and the resourceful mindset that ensured nothing went to waste. Cowboy beans with fatback and dried chilies were born on the trail but found a home in the farmhouse. They were rustic and strong, like the people who cooked them. Pinto beans soaked overnight were simmered slow with hunks of fatback that melted into smoky depth. Dried chilies brought heat, not overwhelming, but just enough to revive tired muscles. Sometimes garlic, sometimes onion, but always thyme. This dish couldn't be rushed. The longer it cooked, the richer it got. It became a staple in Western and Southwestern kitchens, served with cornbread or tortillas, whatever the land allowed. Beans were cheap, hearty, and full of protein, vital when meat was scarce. And fatback, often dismissed now, was once treasured for how far it could stretch. One pot could feed a family and leave leftovers. On cold nights, cowboy beans didn't just fill your stomach. They wrapped you up like a warm coat from the inside. Cheddar grits casserole brought Southern comfort to weeknight tables while cleverly using scraps to stretch a grocery dollar. Cooked grits were stirred with sharp cheddar cheese, a splash of milk, and any small bits of leftover ham before being baked until the top formed a golden crust. The creamy base and salty accents provided warmth and satisfaction, making it a favorite for cool evenings or family gatherings. Because grits were inexpensive and widely available, this casserole offered a filling main dish that fed many mouths without straining a budget. Home cooks often prepared it in the morning and reheated it for supper, appreciating how well it held its texture. Children loved the mild cheese flavor, while adults enjoyed the hearty, stick-to-your-ribs appeal. Paired with a green salad or simple stewed tomatoes, the dish delivered balanced comfort with little expense or effort. Its staying power in community cookbooks and church potluck menus shows how thrifty Southern traditions easily blended with mid-century convenience to create a meal everyone could enjoy. Before we had Taco Tuesday, there were taco-style ground beef wraps, and they showed up whenever ground beef was on sale. Grandma would brown the beef in a skillet, toss in some chili powder, garlic salt, and maybe a spoonful of ketchup or tomato paste, then serve it up inside whatever bread she had around. Sometimes it was a tortilla, sometimes it was plain white sandwich bread folded in half. The seasoning was not store-bought, it was just whatever smelled right. Shredded lettuce, diced onions, or a sprinkle of cheese got added when there was time or leftovers from Sunday. These wraps were messy, fast, and full of flavor. The meat was soft and spicy. The bread was warm and soaked up all the juices. Kids would fold theirs tight and eat it in 2 bites. Adults would eat standing up by the sink, trying not to drop any. This was Tex-Mex before anyone called it that. Comfort food with no instructions and no fuss. Grandma just called it dinner. And somehow, it always hit the spot. Creamed tuna and peas over biscuits was a classic example of stretching canned goods into a full dinner. Housewives stirred canned tuna with peas in a creamy white sauce, then spooned it generously over fresh-baked biscuits. It was inexpensive yet hearty, the kind of meal that filled stomachs without requiring much meat. Children often enjoyed the mild, creamy flavor, while adults valued its practicality, especially on busy nights. The dish was a natural extension of wartime cooking habits when resourcefulness was necessary, and it carried into the 1950s as a dependable standby. Community cookbooks and pamphlets promoted versions of creamed tuna as ways to save money while still offering warmth and comfort. It reflected the reliance on pantry staples like canned fish and vegetables, staples that became central to mid-century home cooking. Creamed tuna and peas over biscuits proved that frugality could still bring families together around the table, leaving memories of meals that were simple yet comforting. Dandelion green salad was probably one of the most resourceful dishes to come out of the Great Depression era. The Great Depression was the worst economic downfall in the United States history. The stock market crashed in October 1929, and that marked the beginning of the end for some people. From October 1929 till the end of 1930, America was at a standstill. It's needless to say, people had a hard time putting food on the table while still trying to keep the family members healthy and happy. So, when money was tight and grocery shopping wasn't an option, people had to turn to their own gardens for some free food. You might be thinking to yourself, is there another type of dandelion that I do not know about? And the answer is no, just your regular grow-in-the-park dandelion. What most of us right now consider a park flower or a pesky weed, people considered a nutritious and, even more important, free source of greens back in the day. Dandelions may have a bit of a bitter bite, but you had to work with what nature gave you. So adding some salt and vinegar was a must. And that's all it took to turn these lawn invaders into a Great Depression-era salad. Families would head out with baskets and pick out an enormous amount of dandelions. So, with no grocery list and no checkout lines, people went out and got their ingredients. But hey, not only did they stretch the food budget, but they also kept their lawns clean and fresh. Talk about multitasking. Back when freezers were a fantasy and meat was whatever wandered near your garden, rabbit was a regular part of the menu. It might sound unusual today, but buttermilk fried rabbit was once the kind of meal that made your mouth water as soon as it hit the pan. The rabbit would be cleaned and soaked in buttermilk for hours, sometimes overnight. This tenderized the meat and gave it that signature tang that fried food dreams are made of. Dredged in seasoned flour, then dropped into a hot cast iron skillet with bacon grease or lard, it came out golden, crispy, and impossibly juicy. The drippings were not thrown away either. That was your gravy base. Stir in a spoonful of flour and a splash of milk, and you had yourself a smooth, peppery sauce to spoon over the meat, or better yet, a biscuit. This was not everyday food. Rabbit was saved for when you had something to show for all your hard work, or when neighbors came over and you wanted to impress. Tomato custard casserole turned two everyday items, canned tomatoes and eggs, into a richly flavored dinner that captured the resourcefulness of the 1960s. The eggs were whisked with milk and a pinch of sugar before being poured over chopped tomatoes and breadcrumbs, then baked until the custard set and the top turned slightly caramelized. This casserole provided protein, vitamins, and comfort all in one dish without requiring expensive meats or elaborate preparation. Many families served it with buttered toast or a simple green salad, letting the natural acidity of the tomatoes balance the creamy custard. The recipe became a reliable weeknight option because it used inexpensive pantry staples that were always on hand. Its smooth texture and gentle sweetness made it appealing to children, while adults appreciated the subtle complexity that developed as the tomatoes baked. This unassuming casserole is a testament to how mid-century cooks could transform basic ingredients into something hearty, nourishing, and surprisingly elegant with little more than patience and a hot oven. Ham and applesauce might sound fancy today, but back in the day it was just something Grandma could throw together before the table was even set. Sliced ham went straight into a hot skillet, sometimes with just a dab of butter or the leftover fat from breakfast. A quick sear on each side was all it needed. Meanwhile, the applesauce, homemade if you had a backyard tree, canned if you were in a hurry, was warming on the back burner. This was dinner you could smell from the front porch. The saltiness of the ham played off the soft, tart sweetness of the apples in a way that felt balanced, simple, and oddly comforting. It was a meal for days when you were tired, when groceries were thin, or when you just needed something that felt familiar. And the best part? No oven. No long wait. Just a skillet, a spoon, and a little heat. Folks might not talk about ham and applesauce as a main course anymore, But for a generation raised on wartime thrift and flavor that did not waste time, this was a weeknight miracle. If you ever needed proof that sweet and salty go hand in hand, here it is. Shepherd's pie with canned vegetables was a thrifty adaptation of a classic dish, using pantry staples to create something hearty and filling. Ground beef was cooked with onions, then combined with canned peas, carrots, or corn before being topped with mashed potatoes. Housewives appreciated that it could be assembled quickly with whatever ingredients were on hand. The topping of mashed potatoes turned it into a full meal, stretching a small amount of meat across several servings. Children liked it because the familiar flavors blended together smoothly, making vegetables easier to eat. Adults valued it as a reliable dish that could be made in large batches, perfect for busy households. By the 1950s, shepherd's pie was firmly established as a comfort food in America, and the canned vegetables made it accessible to all families. It reflected the practicality of mid-century cooking, showing how convenience foods could keep traditions alive while still saving money. For many families, shepherd's pie became a dependable weekly dinner. Let's talk about mac and cheese casserole. It was one of the ultimate Depression-era comfort foods that has stuck around, and for a good reason. When boxed macaroni and cheese hit the scene, it was an instant hit. It was cheap, easy, and offered that specific taste that made everyone forget in how much trouble they were. Well, at least forget it while at a dinner table. In the Great Depression era, people tried to stretch every dollar, and mac and cheese casserole made that possible. With a little milk and some butter, if you had it, you could make a meal that would make everyone at the table smile from joy, while still remaining on the budget. But the magic started when you turned that everyday mac into a casserole. Toss it in a dish with some breadcrumbs or cracker crumbs and bake until it's golden and crispy. And the same thing goes for this casserole as it did for scalloped potatoes. Get creative with it. If you have Sam ham or bacon, don't be afraid to use it. Turnip greens with smoked jowl and corn dumplings was a plate that didn't whisper comfort. It shouted it from the porch. The greens were earthy and sharp, simmered low and slow until they turned silky. But the real heart of the dish was the smoked jowl. That fatty, rich meat brought depth that no store-bought broth ever could. Just a small chunk made the whole pot taste like memory. And then came the corn dumplings, fluffy, gritty, and dropped straight into the greens to soak up all that smoky, peppery flavor. They weren't pretty, but they puffed up like clouds and filled bellies fast. This dish didn't need a side. It was the meal. It was what you made when money was tight but the garden was giving and the butcher knew your name. You could eat a bowl of it and feel the heat settle in your bones. It showed up at Sunday tables, funerals, and quiet weeknights alike. Today, it's rare to see greens cooked this way, let alone with dumplings soaking right in the pot. But for those who remember, one bite is all it takes to bring back the whole kitchen. Pea and egg salad plate was a thrifty supper that turned humble staples into a refreshing main dish for a warm evening. Canned peas were drained and chilled before being folded with chopped hard-boiled eggs, diced celery, and a splash of mild vinegar dressing. A pinch of dry mustard or a spoon of mayonnaise added just enough richness to bind everything together while still keeping the cost low. Served on crisp lettuce leaves or alongside sliced tomatoes from the backyard garden, it provided protein and texture without any need for meat. Home cooks loved how quickly it came together using pantry items that were inexpensive and easy to find year-round. Children enjoyed the gentle sweetness of the peas, while adults appreciated the subtle tang from the dressing. This simple combination was light enough for summertime, but filling enough to carry a family through a busy evening, reflecting the practical yet creative spirit of mid-century kitchens, where canned vegetables and eggs formed the backbone of many dependable weeknight meals. Salmon patties with saltine crumbs were a classic end-of-the-week dinner, the kind of meal you made when the fridge looked sad and the meat was long gone. Canned salmon was a miracle in itself, cheap, shelf-stable, and packed with enough protein to make you feel like you had not missed a step. Grandma would mix it up with crushed saltine crackers, a beaten egg, and maybe a sprinkle of onion or celery if there was any left. She would form them into small patties and fry them in the same pan that had seen 5 meals already. The result? Golden, crispy outsides with soft, savory centers. They had just enough flavor to make you forget they came from a can and not the sea. Served with peas or creamed corn, or just a dollop of mayonnaise on the side, it was the kind of humble meal that never needed applause. It showed up quietly, did its job, and vanished without complaint. But it left everyone full and just a little more hopeful. That is what dinner was supposed to do. Not impressed, not sparkle, just comfort. And that is exactly what these little salmon cakes delivered. Meatloaf muffins with ketchup topping were a clever mid-century spin on a household staple, turning a large loaf into smaller, portion-controlled servings. Housewives mixed ground beef with breadcrumbs and seasonings, then pressed the mixture into muffin tins before baking. Each little meatloaf was topped with ketchup, which caramelized as it cooked, creating a sweet, tangy glaze. Families loved the novelty of the miniature servings, especially children who thought they were fun to eat. Adults appreciated the convenience, since the smaller portions cooked faster and made for easy leftovers. This recipe fit perfectly into the 1950s casserole craze, where presentation and efficiency mattered as much as thrift. They were also ideal for lunchboxes or quick reheating on busy evenings. Meatloaf muffins with ketchup topping captured the creativity of the era, proving that even familiar dishes could be reshaped into something practical, appealing, and memorable for families gathered around the dinner table. Chicken. Get ready to be amazed. Potato pancakes. Yes, potato. They are the definition of taking something as simple as a potato and making it into something crispy and golden, a true masterpiece. There were a lot of potato-based dishes in this video, and here's why. Potatoes were widely available during tough times since they were quite easy to grow and distribute. Flour, on the other hand, was not. These little fried patties were an easy solution without having to rip your hair out in the grocery store. All you really need is a few potatoes, some flour, an egg, and a little oil for frying. And suddenly you've got a meal that's both budget-friendly and delicious. An added bonus of these little pancakes is that they could be served as breakfast, lunch, and dinner, plus a midnight snack for those of us who have late-night cravings. Potato pancakes are as adaptable as you want them to be. Top them off with anything that you have, applesauce or sour cream if you're feeling traditional. However you serve them, you won't be wrong. Potato pancakes were a Depression-era staple for good reason. Inexpensive, easy to make, and satisfying, they turned humble spuds, as Ross would say, into a comfort food classic. Whether you served them with eggs or just plain, they were going to keep you fed, that's a guarantee. Pickle brine pork shoulder roast was not just a meal, it was a strategy. When vinegar was low and salt was tight, leftover pickle brine stepped up as a marinade that worked wonders. Farmers would save the brine from finished jars, pour it over a pork shoulder, and let it soak overnight. The result was meat that was tangy, tender, and packed with flavor from the garlic, dill, or spice lingering in the jar. It might sound odd, but it worked. Once roasted low and slow, the meat came out juicy with crispy edges and a faint pickle tang that made each bite more interesting than the last. Sometimes potatoes or carrots were roasted right alongside it, soaking up the juices and mellowing out the acidity. This was a roast with character. You did not need a glaze or rub or expensive herbs, just leftovers and a little faith in old wisdom. It was kitchen recycling at its finest, and no one ever turned down a plate of it. Pickle brine pork was a quiet triumph of farmhouse cooking, proof that sometimes the scraps held the best surprises. Stuffed tomato boats floated right into many mid-century cookbooks as a budget-friendly way to transform fresh produce into a satisfying dinner. Large tomatoes were carefully hollowed and filled with a mixture of cooked rice, finely chopped celery, onion, and a light drizzle of mayonnaise dressing for moisture. Sometimes a sprinkle of paprika or a handful of breadcrumbs was added on top for color and texture. This simple combination delivered a surprising amount of flavor and a pleasing balance between the juicy tomato walls and the warm rice filling. Home cooks appreciated how the recipe allowed them to use leftover rice and vegetables, reducing waste while creating something pretty enough for company. In summer months, when gardens overflowed with ripe tomatoes, these stuffed boats provided a refreshing alternative to heavier casseroles. They were served chilled for a cool supper or lightly baked when the weather turned cold, proving their versatility across the seasons. Their bright presentation made them a standout dish for picnics, church potlucks, or a light Friday night family meal. Cold dinners had a way of sneaking into the rotation, especially during sticky summers or long days when even boiling water felt like a chore. Cottage cheese and canned peach plates were Grandma's way of keeping things simple but still making it look like she tried. She would scoop a big spoonful of cottage cheese onto a plate, nestle a golden peach half beside it, and top the whole thing with a maraschino cherry if she was feeling fancy. Some people used lettuce as a bed. Others just reached for a fork and got to work. It was creamy, sweet, and oddly refreshing, the kind of combination you only appreciate once you grow up and remember it out of nowhere. The peaches added just enough syrupy sunshine, and the cottage cheese made sure you did not go to bed hungry. It was also what she served when she wanted to eat light but still feed the whole house. This was not a dinner that tried to win over picky eaters. It was a dinner that said, "This is what we have, and it will do just fine." And somehow, it did. Not every meal needed heat or noise. Some just needed quiet. Turkey tetrazzini bake was a perfect solution for leftovers, a creamy casserole that turned Sunday's roast into Monday's dinner. Chunks of turkey were combined with mushrooms, peas, and pasta, all mixed in a white sauce and baked until bubbly. Housewives turned to it after holidays when leftover turkey needed to be used before it spoiled. Children loved the creamy texture and cheesy topping, which transformed what might have been a tired leftover into something new. The dish also carried a sense of elegance, since tetrazzini recipes had originally been associated with restaurant cooking. By the 1950s, cookbooks adapted it for everyday households, simplifying the method but keeping the comforting taste. It reflected the post-war love of casseroles, which combined thrift with convenience. Families found that turkey tetrazzini could stretch a small amount of meat into a full dinner, feeding many without extra cost. It was hearty, warm, and dependable, the kind of dish that filled bellies while still carrying a touch of mid-century sophistication. Mock chicken legs, a true culinary illusion of the Great Depression. When actual chicken legs were too expensive to buy, people had to get creative, crafting drumsticks out of inexpensive cuts of meat like pork or veal and shaping them to look like the real thing. These so-called legs were then breaded, fried, or baked, and served up with high hopes that no one would notice the difference. And honestly, in times as hard as those, nobody even cared which meat they were having, as long as it tasted good and filled you up. The beauty of mock chicken legs is that for a split second, you would forget that it wasn't an actual chicken leg on your plate, rather something that resembled one. It was a brilliant way for families to serve something that felt like a treat without the high cost. Plus, let's give a shout out to all those women who shaped that meat to look like a drumstick. That takes a certain level of dedication. It's a testament to how far people were willing to go to make ends meet while still putting something fun on the table. Mock chicken legs became household favorites, proving that with a little creativity in the kitchen, you could really stretch that budget. Boiled dinner with turnips and neck bones was as plain as it sounded, and as satisfying as a meal could be. You did not need much to make it happen. Some neck bones, a few turnips, maybe a carrot or two, and a pot of salted water. The longer it boiled, the more the bones gave up their flavor and the vegetables soaked it in. It was slow food in the truest sense. No shortcuts, no gadgets, just time, patience, and heat. You might throw in a handful of barley or a chunk of cabbage if you had it, but you did not need to. The broth was rich, the turnips softened just enough, and the meat slid right off the bone. This kind of dish was common in old New England cookbooks, where winters were long and nothing could be wasted. It filled the house with warmth and the bellies with strength. And while it may never have made the cover of a magazine, it made an impression on every family who grew up with it. That is the kind of food that sticks with you. Carrot ring with cream sauce was a clever way for thrifty home cooks of the 1960s to turn a humble root vegetable into the centerpiece of a family meal. Grated carrots were blended with breadcrumbs, eggs, and a hint of nutmeg before being poured into a decorative bundt mold that gave the dish an almost festive look when unmolded. Once baked until lightly browned, the ring was served with a simple white sauce made from milk and a spoon of flour whisked with butter. This meal brought brightness to the dinner table while keeping costs low because carrots were inexpensive and available year-round. Many mothers appreciated how this dish sneaked extra vegetables into the diets of children who might otherwise turn up their noses at plain carrots. The creamy sauce provided a smooth contrast to the tender crumb of the ring and made it feel more indulgent than its price suggested. Guests at church potlucks and neighbors at block parties often requested the recipe, helping it spread across American suburbs and small towns alike. This one came straight out of the open the pantry and hope for a miracle school of cooking. Scrambled eggs with canned chili was never in any cookbook, but it made it onto plates across America faster than most 5-ingredient dinners. Grandma would beat a few eggs with whatever milk she had left, toss them in a skillet, and stir them just until they were barely set. Then came the chili, straight from the can, full of beans and spice and a little bit of mystery meat. It would warm right on top of the eggs until the kitchen smelled like a diner on a slow afternoon. A few slices of toast on the side, maybe a wedge of cheese if you were lucky, and you had yourself a meal. It was hearty, messy, and completely satisfying. No one asked what brand the chili was or whether the eggs were farm fresh. What mattered was that it was hot, filling, and on the table in 10 minutes. It was meals like this that made it possible to get through the rest of the week. And once you have eaten it once, you will understand why it never needed a recipe. Creamed chipped salmon on toast was a thrifty mid-century twist on the more familiar chipped beef, made with canned salmon that was both affordable and shelf-stable. Housewives opened a can, stirred the fish into a creamy white sauce made with milk and flour, and poured it over slices of toasted bread. It was quick, filling, and dependable, especially for families trying to stretch budgets while still putting something warm on the table. The mild flavor of salmon worked well with the sauce, turning plain pantry ingredients into a dish that felt hearty and even a little special. Children often ate it without fuss, since the creamy texture made it smooth and comforting. Adults appreciated that it was inexpensive but still felt like a proper dinner. Diners and lunch counters also served versions of it, making it a recognizable comfort food across communities. Creamed chipped salmon on toast stood as proof of the 1950s ability to take canned goods and transform them into meals that could satisfy families at the end of a long day. Corned beef and potato hash was a true Depression-era hero. It was affordable and filling. In a time when fresh meat was hard to come by, corned beef in a can was a lifesaver. Corned beef and potato hash was a shelf-stable, cheap, and stretchy meal. It was a dish that kept bellies full without keeping the wallets empty. The beauty of corned beef hash was in its simplicity. Fry up some chopped potatoes, toss in that canned corned beef, and let it all get crispy in the pan. Adding an onion or two added a bit of spice, but not everyone had that option available. But even if you couldn't afford onions, the combination of corned beef and potatoes was just enough. It was a meal that tasted like you put way more work in than you actually did. It was the kind of meal that could stretch to feed the whole family and still leave enough for leftovers the next day. Corned beef and potato hash wasn't just a Depression-era staple. It was proof that you didn't need fresh ingredients or fancy cooking techniques to make a hearty, filling, and tasty dish on a budget. Say what you will about simplicity, but cornmeal mush was nothing short of genius. It was cheap, filling, and could be made with 3 things almost every farmhouse had: cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt. You would bring the water to a boil, stir in the cornmeal slowly to avoid lumps, and cook it down until it thickened into a porridge so dense it could hold its shape on a plate. Let it cool in a pan, slice it, and fry those slices in bacon drippings until they turned golden and crisp on the outside, while staying creamy and warm in the middle. Some families served it with molasses or syrup for breakfast. Others paired it with greens or beans for dinner. In Southern kitchens, it was practically a rite of passage. And the bacon fat? That was liquid gold. It added flavor, texture, and just the right amount of indulgence to a meal that cost next to nothing. Cornmeal mush might not look like much, but it had everything a hardworking family needed. It stuck to your ribs and stretched a pantry farther than you thought possible. Sweet and sour cabbage bake turned a single inexpensive vegetable into a lively main dish that brightened even the plainest table. Shredded cabbage was braised slowly with a mixture of vinegar, sugar, and a splash of tomato juice until the leaves softened and soaked up the tangy glaze. A small spoon of butter added just enough richness while keeping the budget firmly in check. The gentle balance of sweet and sour flavors made this casserole appealing to children and adults alike, offering a welcome contrast to heavier meat-based meals. Home cooks valued how it could be made ahead and reheated without losing its texture, making it perfect for church suppers or busy weeknights. Many families served it with thick slices of bread to soak up the flavorful juices, creating a meal that was both frugal and satisfying. This dish demonstrated how careful seasoning and slow cooking could elevate humble cabbage into something memorable, reflecting the creativity of 1960s kitchens where every ingredient was stretched and celebrated for its potential. Bologna and egg scramble was the go-to dinner when breakfast never quite happened and lunch was already a blur. It started with slices of bologna, thick and pink and curled at the edges, hitting the hot pan with a sizzle. Grandma would brown them until they crisped at the edges, then crack in a few eggs and give it all a quick scramble. No measuring, no garnish, just protein and grease and flavor. Sometimes she would add a little shredded cheese if she had some, but it was not necessary. This was about getting food on the table without making it a project. The bologna gave the eggs a smoky, salty edge, and the eggs softened everything just enough to go down easy. Served in bowls, over toast, or straight from the skillet, no one ever walked away hungry. It was simple, dependable, and tasted a whole lot fancier than it had any right to. You could make it in 10 minutes, clean up in 5, and be done with the day before the sun went down. Some meals were special because they were rare. This one was special because it was always there. Ground beef. Spanish rice was a mid-century favorite that showed how much Americans were fascinated by what they considered exotic flavors. Ground beef was cooked with onions, garlic, canned tomatoes, and rice, seasoned with chili powder or paprika for a mild heat. It was simple to prepare, yet carried a flavor profile different from the standard meat and potato dinners of the time. Children found it tasty and filling, while adults enjoyed the novelty of something that seemed worldly without being complicated. Housewives appreciated how a small amount of beef could be stretched with rice to create several servings, making it both thrifty and practical. Many 1950s community cookbooks featured Spanish rice as a staple recipe, reflecting its popularity across the country. It reflected both curiosity and restraint, delivering just enough spice to feel adventurous while still keeping the dish approachable for every family member. Ground beef Spanish rice captured the way mid-century America experimented with new tastes while holding firmly to the values of thrift and convenience. Beans and rice, a dynamic duo that has been filling up bellies for generations. In lean times, this combination was a nutritional powerhouse with protein, carbs, and plenty of flavor, all without costing much. When money was tight, beans and rice were the way to go. They were cheap, filling, and could stretch to feed a whole family with just a few basic ingredients. Another great thing about this meal is its versatility. Got any spices lying around? Throw them in. A sad, lonely veggie waiting to be declared garbage? Throw it in too. It is the meal that will adapt to whatever you had in the house, not the other way around. It always manages to come out tasting like you put more effort into it than you did. Plus, let's be real. When you've got a pot of beans simmering away and some rice cooking on the side, it smells like home, which is what people at the time desperately needed to be reminded of. The beauty of bean and rice is that it is not just a survival meal, it is a comfort food packed with nutrition. There was a time when hog maw did not turn heads. It just meant dinner was ready. If you are not familiar with it, hog maw is the pig's stomach. Not exactly prime real estate on the animal, but it was clean, durable, and able to hold stuffing like a dream. In Pennsylvania Dutch country, it was called pig's stomach, plain and simple, and it was packed with diced potatoes, sausage, onions, and seasoning. You would stitch it shut and bake it low and slow until the skin crisped up and the inside turned soft and savory. It smelled incredible, and when you sliced it open, steam would pour out like a warm invitation. This dish was a tradition, passed down through generations of frugal, practical cooks who believed in using every part of the animal. And honestly, nothing went to waste. If you grew up on a farm, odds are you saw a hog maw at some point, even if you did not know what it was. It was a meal meant to feed many, made from parts most would throw away. But on the farm, waste was not an option. Flavor was found in the overlooked, and hog maw proved it. Bologna and apple skillet combined two humble ingredients in a sweet and savory partnership that captured the playful side of 1960s home cooking. Slices of bologna were quickly browned in a cast iron skillet, then tossed with diced apples and a small knob of butter until the fruit softened and released its natural juices. The salty meat and gently sweet apples created a flavor that felt surprisingly rich despite the low cost. This dish made excellent use of ingredients that were almost always on hand: inexpensive deli meat and seasonal fruit. Families appreciated its speed on busy weeknights, while children were drawn to the fun contrast of tastes and textures. Served over toast or alongside mashed potatoes, it became a complete meal that proved resourceful cooks could create memorable flavors from the simplest pantry staples. Decades later, it remains a reminder of how imaginative combinations could turn everyday items into an unexpected treat without straining a modest household budget or requiring elaborate preparation. Cheesy macaroni and egg scramble was one of those late-night meals that turned into a weeknight tradition. It started when there was leftover macaroni in the fridge, plain, boiled, and sitting cold in a bowl. Grandma would crack in some eggs, sprinkle a handful of shredded cheese, and toss it all into a buttered skillet. The eggs cooked fast, clinging to the pasta like a soft coat, while the cheese melted into every corner. A quick stir here, a little salt there, and dinner was done before the plates were even on the table. It looked like a mess. It tasted like magic. The noodles gave the scramble some bite, and the eggs made it feel like more than just leftovers. If there was ham or hot dog slices in the fridge, they got tossed in too. It was warm, filling, and cheap. Three things every dinner needed to be. Nobody asked for it in a restaurant, but everyone remembered it once they moved out and had to make their own meals. That is the power of recipes like this. They live in your muscle memory, even when the recipe card is long gone. Macaroni and tomato hot dish was a simple but hearty baked meal that made regular appearances on 1950s dinner tables. Elbow macaroni was boiled, then combined with canned tomatoes, onions, and cheese before being baked until bubbly. Housewives relied on this dish because it required only inexpensive pantry staples, yet could feed large families. Children enjoyed the cheesy pasta, which was familiar and comforting, while the tang of tomato added a new flavor dimension. Adults appreciated that it was both affordable and filling, especially during busy weeknights. Many church cookbooks featured versions of macaroni hot dish, each family adding its own twist with extra spices or breadcrumbs. It reflected the casserole craze of the mid-century, where simple combinations of starch, sauce, and cheese became beloved staples. Macaroni and tomato hot dish captured the essence of 1950s cooking: economical, convenient, and satisfying without being fussy. For many, it was the definition of everyday comfort food. Creamed tomato hash with potatoes and fat drippings was what you made when summer was ending and the garden had one last breath left in it. Green tomatoes, those stubborn ones that would not ripen before the frost, were chopped up and tossed into a hot skillet with cubed potatoes and a good amount of leftover bacon or sausage drippings. It sizzled, it popped, and it made the kitchen smell like something was finally going right. This hash was not pretty, but it was packed with flavor. The tomatoes softened but kept their tang, the potatoes crisped at the edges, and the fat tied it all together with smoky depth. Some families added onions or garlic, others tossed in bits of ham or corn if they had it. But at its core, this was about using what would otherwise go to waste. It was breakfast, lunch, or dinner, whatever you needed it to be. Served hot from the pan with a fried egg or a slice of leftover cornbread, it hit the spot every time. It was farm cooking at its smartest, No rules, no frills, just flavor from the ground up. Baked caraway cabbage stew showcased the old-world flavors that many American families rediscovered in the 1960s while keeping costs firmly under control. Shredded cabbage simmered slowly with potatoes, onions, and a sprinkling of aromatic caraway seeds until the vegetables softened and the broth turned fragrant. The caraway lent a gentle licorice note that lifted the humble ingredients, creating a stew that was both comforting and unexpectedly complex. A small amount of butter or oil added richness without driving up the price, and the dish required only a handful of pantry staples to feed a crowd. Many families with Central or Eastern European heritage embraced this recipe as a taste of tradition, while others simply enjoyed its hearty simplicity. Served with rye bread or a slice of cornbread, caraway cabbage stew delivered warmth and satisfaction during cold months. It remains a reminder of how immigrant flavors blended seamlessly into American home cooking, offering deep taste and nourishment from ingredients that were inexpensive, widely available, and easy to store through the winter. Egg salad melts on English muffins were Grandma's way of stretching a dozen eggs across a week. She would boil a batch at the start of the week, mash them up with mayonnaise, mustard, a pinch of salt, and maybe some chopped celery if it was in the drawer. Then, when dinner time came and the fridge was looking bare, she would pull out a few English muffins, split them open, and pile on the egg salad. A slice of cheese went on top, American, cheddar, or whatever was left, and it all went under the broiler for a minute or two. The edges of the muffins crisped, the cheese bubbled, the egg salad warmed and got just the right kind of messy. It was not elegant, but it was real. It was food you could eat with one hand and clean up with the other, and it made a dozen eggs stretch a whole lot farther than you thought possible. Meals like this did not just feed people. They taught you how to make do, stay full, and carry on. Hot dog casserole with noodles was one of those simple 1950s creations that turned an inexpensive ingredient into a family favorite. Housewives sliced hot dogs into coins, stirred them into a creamy noodle mixture, and baked everything together until bubbling. It was an economical way to stretch a package of hot dogs into a full dinner, feeding several mouths with minimal cost. Children were delighted by the playful mix of pasta and sausage, while adults found it practical for busy evenings. It reflected the mid-century fascination with casseroles, where anything could be combined in one dish to save time and money. Many community cookbooks featured versions of hot dog casseroles, each household adding their own twist with cheese, peas, or breadcrumbs. The dish carried a sense of fun while also being grounded in thrift, making it one of the more memorable examples of resourceful cooking. Hot dog casserole with noodles captured the spirit of the 1950s kitchen: creative, frugal, and unashamedly comforting. While we're on the topic of potatoes, scalloped spuds, or rather, scallop potatoes, a dish that takes simple potatoes and makes them into rich, creamy, and cheesy masterpieces. I can put my hand in a fire and say that even the pickiest eaters would turn their heads for this dish. When money was a constant issue, scalloped potatoes became a go-to comfort meal for families looking to make something to impress their guests with. But without spending a fortune, of course. Honestly, who could resist a thinly sliced potato, smothered in a rich and creamy sauce? All you needed in order to make this delicacy was some milk, a little butter, and a sprinkle of cheese. And of course, spuds. Now, what you want to do is layer those thinly sliced potatoes in a baking dish and cover them with sauce. Bake until they turn to that perfect golden color. Here's the fun part. Oh, how amazing a dish is when you can alter it in any way you like. You could add onions, ham, or bacon, or even better, a bit of both. But whatever you choose, you won't be disappointed. Scalloped potatoes will be your best friend in times of need. Now I'm in a mood for something cheesy. Smoked ox tongue with mashed parsnips was a dish that asked for patience, not approval. The tongue, large and leathery before cooking, was scrubbed, brined, and smoked slowly until it sliced like deli meat but tasted deeper, richer, like beef turned inside out. The parsnips, pale cousins to the carrot, were boiled and mashed with butter and a pinch of salt, offering their own subtle sweetness to counter the savory meat. On a cold night, This meal filled the room with steam and the air with the scent of something hearty. It was not glamorous, but it was proud. A dish that used what was available and turned it into something memorable. You did not serve ox tongue to impress. You served it because it was yours to work with. On the farm, nothing went to waste. Every part of the animal had a purpose. And this part, once smoked and sliced, could last through several meals. Tongue has vanished from most plates, and parsnips are more often passed over than picked. But for those who knew how to cook with care, this was a dish that fed more than just hunger. It fed resilience, and it fed family. Parsley noodle pudding brought a delicate herbal note to the classic baked noodle dish, turning inexpensive staples into a fragrant supper centerpiece. Wide egg noodles were cooked until just tender, then mixed with milk, eggs, a little butter, and a generous handful of freshly chopped parsley before baking to a golden finish. The custard base held everything together while the parsley added color and a bright, garden-fresh taste that lifted the entire dish. This pudding was equally welcome as a vegetarian main course or as a side alongside roasted vegetables. Because the ingredients were inexpensive and easy to keep on hand, it fit perfectly into the thrifty mindset of 1960s households. Home cooks appreciated how it could be assembled in advance and baked just before serving, freeing time for family or guests. Children enjoyed the mild flavor and silky texture, while adults admired its simple elegance. Parsley noodle pudding remains a quiet reminder that with a little imagination, even the most modest pantry can produce a meal worth remembering. There were two things nearly every kitchen had back then: creamed corn and hot dogs. When both of them landed in the same skillet, dinner was practically done. This was the kind of meal Grandma made when time was short and kids were restless. She would slice the hot dogs into little coins and toss them into a buttered pan until they browned just right around the edges. Then came the creamed corn, thick, sweet, and silky from the can. It all got mixed together into a bubbling, golden mess that looked questionable to some but tasted like warm security. You could eat it on its own, spoon it over bread, or mop it up with the last slice of toast from breakfast. Nobody called it gourmet, but everyone called it dinner. It filled your belly, cleaned out the pantry, and gave you one less thing to worry about. And somehow, it was the meal that lingered in memory more than any roast or fancy casserole. Maybe it was the smell. Maybe it was how fast it came together. Or maybe it was just that it tasted better when you were young, hungry, and too impatient to wait for something fancier. Cabbage roll casserole was a staple of frugal cooking, turning ground meat and rice into a filling dinner wrapped in cabbage leaves. Housewives layered seasoned meat and rice inside blanched cabbage, rolled it tightly, and baked the bundles in tomato sauce. The dish was practical because cabbage was inexpensive and abundant, especially from backyard gardens. Children were sometimes hesitant at first, but the rich tomato sauce and savory filling won them over. Adults appreciated the satisfying flavor and the fact that a little meat went a long way when paired with rice and vegetables. It also became popular at community suppers and church potlucks, where its hearty portions made it easy to share. Many cookbooks of the 1950s included cabbage rolls as an example of thrifty yet wholesome cooking. The casserole reflected the post-war trend of stretching ingredients creatively, turning humble produce into a centerpiece meal. Cabbage roll casserole proved that practical cooking could also carry comfort and tradition, nourishing families without unnecessary expense. Boiled dinner featuring corned beef and cabbage was the ultimate meat stretch of its time. People had to find ways to make a little go a long way, and nothing could to it as good as a boiled dinner. Just imagine that you've got a hunk of corned beef, some cabbage that's, let's be honest, seen better days, and a few potatoes hanging out in the pantry, and voila, dinner is served. Throw everything in one pot, add water, and let it simmer until the meat is tender and the vegetables soften. It is a meal that practically cooks itself, while you sit back and enjoy some quality time with your family, or while you chase your kids around the house. But the leftovers are the real prize. You can turn them into sandwiches and hash, and you can even use the leftover broth for a new soup. This boiled dinner is the perfect reminder that with just a bit of creativity, you can whip up a delicious meal even when money is tight. Hoosier farmstead meatloaf with cornflake crust was as Midwestern as it gets. It was humble, dependable, and always showed up when you needed it most. Ground beef, or whatever blend of meat you had, was mixed with onion, egg, milk, and a handful of crushed cornflakes. No breadcrumbs here. The cornflakes gave it a sweet crunch that toasted perfectly in the oven. This meatloaf was baked in a sheet pan, not a fancy tin, and sliced into squares instead of thick rounds. It was easy to portion, easy to stretch, and even easier to love. You would often see it at community potlucks or church suppers, where it held its own beside casseroles and potato salads. Some folks added ketchup on top, others left it plain. But no matter the version, it always smelled like home. This dish came from a time when cereal was not just for breakfast. It was a pantry staple that made everything go further. In farm kitchens, nothing went to waste, and cornflakes were just another way to make do. The meatloaf may not have been glamorous, but it was reliable. And when your day started at sunrise, that kind of reliability mattered more than anything else. Apple sausage bread. Pudding married sweet and savory flavors in a way that perfectly captured the experimental spirit of the 1960s kitchen. Day-old bread cubes soaked up a custard of milk and eggs before being mixed with diced apples and small bits of sausage for richness. The dish baked until the top turned golden and the apples released their gentle perfume, filling the home with an inviting scent. By using stale bread and modest amounts of meat, thrifty cooks created a dinner that felt both indulgent and practical. The sweetness of the fruit balanced the smoky sausage, while the custard kept every bite moist. Families often served it with a simple green salad for contrast or a drizzle of maple syrup when they wanted extra sweetness. This recipe highlighted the era's willingness to blend unexpected flavors while keeping costs low. Leftovers reheated beautifully for breakfast the next day, making it a true two-meal wonder that reflected the frugal yet inventive cooking style of mid-century American households. Quick tomato and rice soup was less of a recipe and more of a family habit. It started with canned tomato soup, the kind that came in a red and white can and waited patiently in your pantry for its moment. Instead of milk or water, Grandma would stir in leftover rice from the night before, just a scoop or two, enough to bulk it up and stretch it across the whole table. The rice gave it body, the soup gave it flavor, and together they made something more than the sum of their parts. It simmered on the stove while she folded laundry or paid bills at the kitchen table. It was the smell that told you dinner was ready, not the clock. No one complained that it was simple. In fact, that was the point. You could top it with cheese, swirl in a bit of cream, or eat it plain with saltines on the side. Whatever the case, it went down smooth, warmed you up fast, and made a long day feel less heavy. It might not win any ribbons, but it won over every empty stomach it ever met. Beef and cabbage hot dish was the kind of recipe that felt both hearty and thrifty, the very definition of mid-century practicality. Housewives browned ground beef with onions, layered it with chopped cabbage, and baked it all together in a simple tomato base. The result was a filling casserole that stretched a pound of meat into enough servings to feed a hungry family. Children often wrinkled their noses at the sight of cabbage, but once it baked down with the beef and sauce, it became sweet and tender, blending smoothly with the other flavors. Adults appreciated how nourishing it was, providing both protein and vegetables in one easy pan. Church cookbooks of the 1950s often featured variations of this dish, reflecting its popularity across communities. It was affordable, convenient, and required only pantry staples, making it a dependable weeknight choice. Beef and cabbage hot dish was not glamorous, but it embodied the resourcefulness of the decade, keeping families satisfied on limited budgets while still delivering the warmth of a home-cooked meal. Oven, make the best out of those leftover peppers. Turn that basic box of pasta into something indulgent. Moving away from the cheesy, creamy dishes, we are now in the turnip and carrot hash territory. Now please listen to this. I know how it sounds, but give it a chance. I mean, our ancestors did eat this at some point in time. It's not inedible. When potatoes were too precious to waste, turnips were the ones who took over their spotlight. During hard times, Turnips, these beasts of root vegetables, were everyone's go-to for stretching meals. As for the preparation, there's not much to say. Just chop turnips and carrots, throw them in a pot with some oil, and let them sizzle until they're golden brown. As they cook, their earthy flavors will come together and create the perfect hash. I love a good hash, honestly. This one in particular didn't really catch my eye, but hey, who am I to judge? Maybe it's a once-in-a-lifetime dining experience. Who knows? I think it would taste much better with some meat in it, and our ancestors agreed with that statement. Plus, it's the kind of dish that could easily be turned into a breakfast if you cracked one egg and fired it. So, whether you were craving breakfast, lunch, or dinner, turnip and carrot hash could fill your every desire. Mashed turnip and bacon bake was not the kind of dish you dreamed about, but it was the one you asked for again. Turnips were easy to grow and even easier to store, lasting through the cold months when the rest of the produce had disappeared. Peeled, boiled, and mashed with butter, they were then folded together with bits of crisp bacon and poured into a baking dish. Topped with breadcrumbs or more bacon fat, the dish was baked until golden and bubbling at the edges. It was smoky, savory, and had just enough bitterness from the turnips to remind you this was farm food, not diner fare. Served with black bread or a fried egg, it could carry you through a whole evening without a second thought. This was not a celebration meal, but it was a regular one, and over time, it grew on you. The kind of dish that years later still shows up in memory, even if the recipe was lost, because it was practical, filling, and full of flavor that came from the land, not the label. Peanut butter and celery rice surprised many families with its simple combination of protein and crunch, while staying true to the spirit of economical cooking. Hot-cooked rice was stirred with a generous spoon of peanut butter until it melted into a creamy coating, then finished with finely diced celery for freshness and texture. The nutty flavor provided satisfying richness without the need for meat, while the celery added a pleasant bite that kept each spoonful lively. Children enjoyed the mild sweetness of the peanuts, and parents appreciated how the dish delivered both carbohydrates and protein at a very low cost. It could be served as a warm side dish or as a light vegetarian main course alongside a crisp salad. This inventive recipe reflected the era's openness to global influences and practical experimentation, proving that even unexpected pairings could become a family favorite. Peanut butter and celery rice stands as a delicious reminder of how 1960s cooks stretched their budgets while creating meals that were nourishing, flavorful, and delightfully different. Sardines on crackers with onion and mustard was never anyone's idea of a celebration, but it sure was dinner. On the nights when nothing was thawed, the stove stayed cold, and Grandma was too tired to fuss. This is what came out. The sardines came straight from the tin, laid out on saltines or toast rounds. A sliver of raw onion went on top, followed by a little mustard, just enough to punch it up. It was salty, it was sharp, and it was surprisingly satisfying. You could eat 3 or 4 and call it a night, or serve them with a boiled egg and call it fancy. They were high in protein, low in cost, and required zero prep. Lent, lean budgets, or hot summers, this was a go-to. Kids turned up their noses. Adults cleaned their plates. It was not glamorous, but it worked. And in homes where nothing went to waste and every bite counted, that was enough. You might not crave it now, but if you grew up with it, you never really forgot. Sloppy Joe supper became a sensation in the 1950s, combining ground beef with tangy tomato-based sauce and serving it over bread or buns. Housewives loved how quick and inexpensive it was, turning 1 pound of beef into several sandwiches with ease. Children adored the messy, saucy sandwiches, often making them a requested favorite. Adults appreciated the bold flavor, a break from plainer meat dishes of the time. Community cookbooks spread countless versions of Sloppy Joes, from highly spiced to sweet and mild. They were equally at home on weeknight dinner tables and at church gatherings where large batches could be served with little effort. The dish reflected the mid-century love of casual, hearty meals that balanced thrift with fun. Sloppy Joes were affordable, versatile, and comforting, perfectly suited for a growing suburban culture. Sloppy Joe supper was more than just a sandwich. It became a cultural marker of 1950s kitchens, remembered fondly for its taste and its cheerful messiness. When times were tough, nothing went to waste, especially not bread. Instead of tossing out stale loaves, families turned them into dumplings to stretch meals further, and tomato soup became the perfect partner for this duo. You'd take some day-old bread, mix it with a little milk and maybe an egg if you had one, and form it into dumplings. Then, plop those into a pot of your regular tomato soup, and you've just transformed a basic dish into something served at restaurants. The bread dumplings would soak up that rich tomato flavor, making every bite feel more flavorful. It was a genius way to avoid food waste and make the most out of what was on hand. Not to mention that tomato soup was already a favorite since it was cheap and easy to make from canned tomatoes. The bread dumplings were just a cherry on top, or dare I say, the dumpling in soup. Together, they created a hearty, satisfying meal that filled you up without costing too much. And that is a win-win in my book. Egg noodle casserole with sour cream and leftover ham was one of those end-of-the-week miracles. It started with the realization that you had a little of this and a little of that, but not enough of anything on its own. So you boiled some egg noodles, mixed in that last scoop of sour cream, and tossed in whatever ham was left from Sunday's roast. Some versions added peas or onions, others used breadcrumbs or cheese on top. The whole thing baked into a bubbling, golden pan of comfort that tasted like it took hours, but came together in minutes. It was the kind of recipe you did not even need to measure. Just feel it out. It lived in the margins of old community cookbooks, written in pencil, adjusted for whatever life threw at you that month. And it always worked. Even when the pantry felt empty, this casserole made sure no one went to bed hungry. It was forgiving, flexible, and loved by every generation that passed it down. In a world where food waste was not an option, dishes like this were worth their weight in gold. Cornflake-crusted fish squares were a playful answer to the challenge of making inexpensive whitefish appealing to the whole family. Thin fillets of cod or haddock were cut into squares, dipped in milk and egg, and coated with crushed cornflakes left over from breakfast. Baking or frying turned the cereal coating into a crisp, golden crust that sealed in moisture and added a gentle sweetness. This recipe allowed households to use affordable frozen fish while giving it a texture reminiscent of more expensive fried seafood. Children found the crunchy coating irresistible, and parents enjoyed how quickly the dish came together on busy weeknights. The cornflakes acted as an economical substitute for breadcrumbs and made use of pantry items that might otherwise go stale. Served with a squeeze of lemon or a side of tartar sauce, these fish squares brought a fun and frugal twist to the dinner table, showing the inventive spirit of 1960s cooking where nothing in the kitchen ever went to waste. Minute steak with ketchup glaze was a favorite when Grandma needed to make dinner fast but still wanted it to feel like something special. She would pull out a thin cut of beef. Sometimes it was actually labeled minute steak, other times it was just the least expensive cut sitting in the butcher's case. She would heat a skillet until it was almost smoking, toss the steak in with a little oil or butter, and sear both sides until it browned and sizzled. That alone would have been enough, but Grandma liked to give it a little extra. She made a glaze from plain ketchup and a splash of Worcestershire sauce. If she had a bit of sugar or vinegar, she might toss that in too, just to give it a little zing. It would bubble up right there in the pan, coating the steak in a sticky, tangy sauce that clung to the edges and caramelized just enough. Served with mashed potatoes or on plain sandwich bread, it was the closest thing you got to steak night without the steakhouse. It came together in minutes, fed everyone full, and left just one pan to clean. That glaze? It made it magic. A spaghetti pie with cottage cheese was one of the more inventive dishes of the 1950s, turning a bowl of pasta into something resembling a savory pie. Housewives lined a pie pan with cooked spaghetti, then layered it with cottage cheese, tomato sauce, and sometimes ground beef before baking until firm. The finished dish could be sliced like a pie, creating tidy servings that were both fun and filling. Children loved the novelty of spaghetti presented in pie form, while adults appreciated its practicality. It was a clever way to repurpose leftover pasta into something that felt new and exciting. Cookbooks often highlighted it as a dish that combined Italian inspiration with American frugality, reflecting the decade's fascination with adapting ethnic flavors to family budgets. Spaghetti pie with cottage cheese represented the creativity of mid-century households, where presentation was as important as thrift. It became a memorable recipe of the era, balancing novelty, economy, and comfort all in one. Tracing back to soups for a second, I forgot my favorite one, potato soup, a true staple for when you're on a budget and trying to feed the crowd. With just a few spuds, I can never say that word and not think of Ross dressed as Spudnik in that Halloween episode of Friends. Never mind, allow me to continue. As I was saying, with just a few spuds, some water or broth, and a little milk or cream, you can whip up a pot of creamy soup that will make you feel like you're eating something fancy. Potato soup is as simple as it gets, but that's why everyone loves it. Plus, if you throw in a few onions and carrots, my dears, you've got yourself a true delicacy. Ooh, and don't forget the toppings. Cheese, bacon bits, and green onions can really jazz this dish up. And as all of you probably know, potato soup tastes even better the next day, once all the ingredients get a chance to, as I like to say, get to know each other better. I don't know about you, but this soup is my favorite even today, when it's not made to stretch the family's food budget, but rather to bring some nostalgic feelings around the house. Molasses-baked sausage patties were the kind of dinner that made the whole house smell like someone had been cooking all day, even if it only took one pan and half an hour. Ground pork was mixed with breadcrumbs, dry mustard, black pepper, and just enough molasses to hold it all together. Rolled into thick patties, these went into the oven where the molasses caramelized around the edges, turning sweet and savory at once. The crust was dark, nearly burnt looking, but that was the best part. Inside, the meat stayed tender. This was a southern staple, especially where molasses was cheaper than sugar. Some folks added vinegar for bite, others threw in a pinch of clove to warm it up. Whatever the twist, it was always eaten hot, usually with spoon bread or mustard greens. Leftovers went into biscuits the next morning. This was not fancy food. It was smart and full of that down-home flavor that sticks to your fingers and memory. No one forgot these patties, even long after the molasses jar ran dry. Mock veal loaf delivered the flavor of expensive cuts without the price, an idea perfectly suited to the frugal 1960s kitchen. Ground pork was blended with breadcrumbs, minced onion, and a touch of milk before being seasoned with a bit of sage and pepper to mimic the gentle taste of veal. The mixture was shaped into a loaf and baked until the top formed a golden crust and the inside stayed moist and tender. A light tomato glaze or brown gravy completed the illusion, giving families a hearty centerpiece that felt far fancier than its ingredients suggested. This recipe became a favorite in community cookbooks and church fundraisers because it fed a crowd with ingredients already on hand. Leftovers made excellent sandwiches the next day, stretching the value even further. By transforming simple pork and pantry staples into something that seemed luxurious, mock veal loaf embodied the clever resourcefulness that defined many mid-century American dinners, proving that satisfying flavor did not require an expensive shopping list or complicated preparation. Vegetable beef soup supper was a hearty, economical dinner that stretched scraps and bones into a pot large enough to feed the entire family. Housewives simmered beef bones with onions, carrots, and potatoes, often tossing in any leftover vegetables from the week. The long simmering brought rich flavor, while the vegetables made it filling and nutritious. Children loved dipping bread into the broth, while adults valued how a single pot could last across multiple meals. It was also a social dish, appearing frequently at church suppers and community gatherings where large pots could feed crowds. Cookbooks emphasized its thrift, noting how bones and scraps could be used effectively instead of wasted. The soup reflected the enduring influence of Depression-era habits on 1950s cooking, where resourcefulness remained central. Vegetable beef soup supper was more than just a meal. It was a tradition of gathering around a pot that symbolized thrift, warmth, and the communal spirit of mid-century America. Fried cornbread, or as some like to call it, hoe cakes, was a Southern staple during the Great Depression that made every meal a bit more enjoyable. When you didn't have much, cornbread was the thing that came to the rescue. It was simple, affordable, and made with ingredients most people had on hand: cornmeal, water, maybe a bit of buttermilk if you were one of God's favorites. Plus, if you throw it in a hot skillet with some oil, you could turn those ingredients into some crispy, golden, and irresistible bites. Fried cornbread was often served with soups or beans, two other Depression-era staples, as you've learned by now. Together, they made a hearty, filling meal that could stretch for days. And I don't know about you, but that crispy cornbread edge is something that always makes my mouth water. Dip it into a bowl of soup or pile on some beans, and suddenly a modest meal feels a little more special. And let's be real, anything fried instantly ups the comforting factor. I mean, just take a look at Kentucky Fried Chicken. Would they be as popular if they were Kentucky Boiled Chicken? I don't think so. You do not hear about parsnips much anymore. They are like the forgotten cousin of the carrot, slightly sweet, totally underrated, and at one time, a farm kitchen favorite. Pork and parsnip skillet bake was what families turned to when the root cellar was almost empty, but they still needed to put something warm and weighty on the table. Pork, especially the cheaper cuts like shoulder or belly, was browned in a cast iron skillet with onions and a little lard. Then the peeled parsnips went in, sliced thick and tossed in whatever broth or milk you had lying around. You would season it with sage or thyme if you were lucky, and bake the whole thing until the top browned just enough to get a little crispy. This was not a holiday meal. It was survival with soul. Parsnips stretched the dish and added a subtle sweetness that made the saltiness of the pork shine. It was farm logic at its finest. Make the most out of what you have and find comfort in the flavor. Rutabaga and carrot mash brought together two hearty root vegetables that thrived in cold climates and offered dependable nourishment long after harvest. Peeled rutabagas and carrots were boiled until tender, then whipped with butter and a sprinkle of black pepper into a smooth, golden mash. The natural sweetness of the carrots balanced the earthy flavor of the rutabaga, creating a dish that felt both rustic and refined. Because these vegetables stored well in cellars for months, families could rely on them for inexpensive winter meals when fresh produce was scarce. The bright color and gentle taste appealed to children, while adults appreciated the hearty texture and vitamins packed into every spoonful. Served alongside roasted chicken when budgets allowed or enjoyed on its own with a slice of bread, rutabaga and carrot mash exemplified the 1960s emphasis on making the most of seasonal vegetables. It remains a comforting side or main dish that highlights how frugal ingredients can combine to create something far greater than the sum of their humble parts. Onion. Spam and cabbage was the kind of meal that did not sound like much but got the job done, and then some. Grandma would slice the spam into thick chunks and toss it into a hot pan until the edges crisped and curled. Then came the shredded cabbage, sizzling as it hit the fat, softening in the salt, and soaking up every bit of flavor. A splash of vinegar or a pinch of sugar if she felt like balancing things out. That was it. No special tools, no hard steps. But the kitchen always smelled like something better than it should have. The cabbage turned silky. The spam, golden and caramelized. You could eat it on its own or pile it over mashed potatoes or rice if you had extra. For many, it was a Depression holdover. For others, it was just what you made when payday was still a few days away. It was salty, hearty, and fast. The holy trinity of Grandma's weekday dinners. And for all the jokes people made about spam, no one left hungry. You might laugh at the idea now, but back then, this was dinner you could trust. Cheesy potato and ham casserole was one of the most dependable dishes of the 1950s, born out of the need to stretch leftovers into something hearty. Housewives layered thin slices of potato with bits of leftover ham, pouring a creamy cheese sauce over the top before baking it to bubbling perfection. The dish was warm, filling, and economical, transforming scraps from Sunday dinner into a satisfying family meal during the week. Children loved the gooey cheese and tender potatoes, While adults appreciated how the dish managed to feel indulgent without requiring expensive ingredients, it became especially popular at church suppers and community potlucks, where it was easy to prepare in large pans and guaranteed to disappear quickly. Cookbooks often listed variations, sometimes swapping in onions or peas, showing its versatility across households. The cheesy potato and ham casserole perfectly embodied the balance of thrift and comfort that defined mid-century kitchens, offering nourishment, flavor, and nostalgia in one practical dish. Potato and egg gratin with onion butter was a meatless marvel that felt richer than it had any right to. Thin slices of potato were layered in a casserole dish, with slow-cooked onions and butter nestled between. On top went beaten farm eggs, poured gently to soak the layers. Some added cream if they had it. Others cracked whole eggs right on top and let them bake. The result was golden and velvety in the middle. It was the kind of dish that felt like brunch before anyone said that word. It had a little of everything: soft, crunchy, savory, and just indulgent enough. This gratin showed up when meat was too costly or saved for Sunday. It was a hit at barn suppers and church picnics, easy to cut and serve. Onion butter was the quiet star. It gave flavor and fat when there was little else. On a cold night, one bite was enough to keep you going till morning. That is how farmhouse families made it through. Eggplant Parmesan casserole gave budget-minded families a taste of Italian-inspired comfort without the cost of imported ingredients. Slices of eggplant were lightly breaded, quickly browned in a skillet, and layered with canned tomato sauce, dried oregano, and a modest sprinkle of grated cheese. Baked until the sauce bubbled and the cheese melted, the dish emerged fragrant and hearty, ready to feed a hungry household. Because eggplant was plentiful in late summer and canned tomatoes were available year-round, the recipe fit perfectly into a thrifty meal plan. Many 1960s home cooks discovered it through community cookbooks that encouraged vegetable-centered dinners when meat prices rose. Served with a side of spaghetti or crusty bread, it felt festive enough for company while staying within a modest budget. The mild flavor of the eggplant absorbed the savory sauce beautifully, making each bite satisfying without the need for heavy amounts of cheese or meat. Eggplant Parmesan casserole quickly became a reliable favorite for families eager to stretch their food dollars while still offering something warm and flavorful. The cheddar and tomato open-faced broil was the kind of dinner that always looked better than it had any right to. Grandma would take thick slices of sandwich bread, lay down a few rounds of fresh or canned tomato, and top it all with slabs of cheddar cheese. Then into the broiler it went, just long enough for the cheese to melt and bubble, with the edges crisping up like a grilled sandwich turned inside out. It was salty, juicy, and exactly what you needed when the pantry felt a little too empty. Some people added a shake of black pepper. Others spooned on a little mayonnaise before the cheese went on. It was flexible, forgiving, and always fast. You did not need a recipe, just a sense of timing and a hot oven. It fed kids after school. It filled up adults after work, and it made the house smell like someone was trying, even if it was just the toaster oven doing most of the work. That was Grandma's magic. She made 10-minute meals feel like home. Cheese soufflé casserole was a lighter dinner option that carried an air of sophistication, popularized by women's magazines of the 1950s. Housewives beat eggs with milk and cheese, baking the mixture until it puffed and turned golden. It was inexpensive yet presented beautifully, making it a favorite for luncheons or dinner parties. Children liked the airy texture, while adults saw it as a refined alternative to heavier casseroles. It also reflected the era's fascination with French-influenced cooking, which was often adapted for American kitchens. Cookbooks promoted soufflé casseroles as impressive dishes that did not require costly ingredients. They offered homemakers the chance to serve something elegant while still respecting household budgets. The cheese soufflé casserole embodied the balance of thrift and aspiration that defined the decade, turning simple pantry items into a dish that looked far more extravagant than it really was. It became a symbol of how presentation and creativity mattered as much as taste in mid-century kitchens. To end off with a classic, let me tell you something about spaghetti with tomato sauce. Spaghetti was and still is the classic go-to meal for when you want to prepare something cheap but still crowd-pleasing. During tough times, canned tomatoes became a pantry staple that could transform into sauces, soups, and stews. Basically, they played a superhero in their story. When it came to stretching the budget, spaghetti was truly unbeatable. The preparation is not that different from today, but let me show you anyway. Firstly, you want to simmer those canned tomatoes with some garlic and maybe an onion if you like, and boom, there's the sauce. It doesn't take much to make this dish great and a family favorite. Toss in some dried herbs for extra flavor, and sprinkle a bit of Parmesan if it is a special occasion, and all of a sudden you've got yourself a fancy meal that costs you pennies, but would cost you big bank in Italy. It was as satisfying as it was affordable. You could feed an entire family for the price of a few canned tomatoes, and that was truly beautiful in those times. Plus, it was versatile enough to adapt to whatever else you had lying around. Spaghetti with tomato sauce was good proof that great food doesn't have to be expensive. Baked oxtail pie with root vegetables was not for those in a rush. Oxtail took hours to tenderize, and every hour meant more flavor. First, it was browned, then simmered with carrots, turnips, and onions until the meat slid right off the bone. The vegetables absorbed all that beefy flavor, creating a thick, dark stew full of soul. That stew went into a homemade crust, usually flour, lard, and effort, and was sealed with another crust on top. It baked golden, bubbling at the edges. You smelled it before you saw it. At the table, nobody spoke until plates were clean. This pie was a winter staple, especially in homes where no cut was wasted. Oxtail was scrap to some, but gold to those who knew better. It was food that demanded patience and rewarded it richly. Farm life taught those lessons young, and for anyone who remembers it, oxtail pie wasn't just a meal. It was proof that the best dishes often start with what others throw away. Corn and cottage cheese pie turned two budget staples into a surprisingly elegant dinner dish that impressed guests as well as family. Sweet corn kernels, either fresh or canned, were combined with creamy cottage cheese, beaten eggs, and a touch of flour to create a smooth filling that set beautifully inside a simple pastry shell. Baking brought out a gentle sweetness that paired perfectly with the tang of the cheese, making each slice rich yet light. This pie was easy to prepare ahead of time and served equally well warm or at room temperature, an advantage for busy hosts or church suppers. The ingredients were inexpensive and widely available, making it an accessible option for families looking to stretch their food dollars without sacrificing flavor. Leftovers held up well and could be enjoyed for breakfast or lunch the next day. Its enduring charm lies in how it transforms humble pantry items into something that feels like a special occasion, capturing the inventive spirit of 1960s American home cooking. There is something about a fried bologna sandwich with yellow mustard that never really leaves you. Grandma would slice a thick round of bologna and toss it onto a hot skillet. As it browned, it would puff up in the center, curling into a little cup with crisp edges and sizzling sides. She would slap it onto a slice of white bread, smear on some yellow mustard, the real kind, tangy and bright, and fold it up like a letter you could eat. That was dinner. No side dish, no dessert, just a hot sandwich that hit the spot in less than 5 minutes. The smell of frying bologna was unmistakable. Part school lunch, part diner counter, part home. It was cheap, fast, and unforgettable. You might not see it on a dinner menu, but it fed generations of kids and kept more than a few households running when money ran thin. And if you ever had one fresh off the skillet, you probably still remember the first bite. Corned beef and potato hash supper was a skillet meal rooted in practicality, often made with canned corned beef left over from wartime habits. Housewives diced potatoes, onions, and corned beef, frying everything together until crisp on the edges. It was inexpensive, quick, and filling, the kind of dinner that could be made on a busy weeknight with whatever was already in the pantry. Children enjoyed the salty, hearty flavor, while adults appreciated that it made good use of shelf-stable ingredients. It was especially popular in working-class households, where stretching canned meat was a necessity. Cookbooks frequently listed hash suppers as versatile dishes that could adapt to whatever vegetables were on hand. Served with eggs or bread, it became a complete meal that carried both comfort and thrift. Corned beef and potato hash supper captured the ingenuity of 1950s kitchens, where leftovers and pantry staples were never wasted, but instead transformed into dinners that filled stomachs and brought families together around the table. Circling back to soups for a second, let's talk about egg drop soup. This is one of those incredible dishes that somehow manages to be elegant and simple at the same time. It was inspired by Chinese cuisine, and it had become a go-to meal for many families during tough times because it required so few ingredients but still managed to deliver a good amount of nutritional value. All you needed was broth, 1 or 2 eggs, and a bit of green onions. The great thing about egg drop soup is that the preparation doesn't take up much of your time. You heat the broth up and gently whisk in some beaten eggs. Even though eggs seem like the star of the show, the actual star is the broth, since it makes those eggs into something that will keep those bellies happy. Egg drop soup was perfect for families trying to use up any ingredients they had in the house. Whether served as a starter or as a main dish with a side of rice or vegetables, it brought a taste of something new to the table. It was simple, affordable, and downright comforting when comfort was all any of our ancestors were looking for in the era of the Great Depression. Creamed celery and potatoes sounds like something from a tea party, but back in the day, it was dinner for a family of 5. Celery was easy to grow, especially during late harvest when you had already used up most of your hearty vegetables. Potatoes, of course, were always in the bin. You would chop both up, boil them until soft, then cover the whole thing in a cream sauce made with butter, milk, and flour. If you had a bit of cheese, you might grate some on top. But even without it, the dish was rich and comforting. It was usually served hot with biscuits or toasted bread and scraped clean before it could cool. Celery gave a bright crunch that balanced the heaviness of the sauce, while the potatoes carried it all home. Meat might be missing, but no one left the table hungry. This kind of dish showed how you could eat well on very little. No fuss, no meat, no problem. Just warmth, thrift, and a sense of calm after a hard day. Creamed celery and potatoes reminded folks that flavor could come from the field, not just the butcher's counter. Baked lima bean patties transformed a pantry staple into a crispy, protein-rich entree that required very little money or effort. Cooked lima beans were mashed with breadcrumbs, minced onion, and a touch of seasoning before being shaped into small cakes and baked until golden on the outside while soft within. The gentle flavor of the beans paired well with a spoon of tomato relish or a drizzle of simple white sauce, offering a balanced and filling meal. Because dried beans were inexpensive and stored for months, this recipe provided a dependable option for families watching their grocery bills. Children often enjoyed the mild taste, especially when the patties were served on soft rolls like a vegetarian burger. Homemakers appreciated that they could prepare the mixture in advance and bake it just before dinner, keeping evenings stress-free. Baked lima bean patties demonstrate the quiet creativity of mid-century kitchens, where resourceful cooks turned everyday staples into meals that were hearty, healthy, and surprisingly elegant for such modest ingredients. Cornbread and buttermilk in a bowl might not sound like much, but it was a whole supper to folks who knew how to stretch $1. Grandma would crumble leftover cornbread into a dish, pour cold buttermilk right on top, and hand it over with a spoon. That was it. No cooking, no warming up. Just cold, tangy, crumbly simplicity. It was a Southern staple that made its way into kitchens all across America, especially during hot months or tight times. Some people added salt. Others stirred in a little honey. But most just ate it as it was, a strange but surprisingly filling meal that stuck with you. The cornbread soaked up the buttermilk, softening into something almost like a pudding. It was not meant to impress, just to nourish, and for a lot of families, it was all they needed at the end of a long day. It was cheap, it was easy, and most importantly, it got the job done. That is the kind of dinner that deserved a place in every old cookbook. Skillet sausage with potatoes and peppers was a one-pan wonder that brought bold flavor to the dinner table without stretching the grocery bill. Housewives sliced sausage links thin, frying them with diced potatoes and colorful peppers until everything was browned and tender. The result was hearty, colorful, and quick to prepare, perfect for busy evenings. Children loved the mix of textures, while adults appreciated how the dish stretched a small amount of sausage across several servings. It was a practical recipe that combined thrift with satisfying taste, proving that even modest portions of meat could anchor a full meal. Community cookbooks often promoted this dish as a dependable option for weeknights, since it used ingredients most households already had on hand. It reflected the 1950s trend towards simple, filling dinners that could be prepared with minimal fuss. Skillet sausage with potatoes and peppers stood out as a flavorful reminder of how mid-century kitchens made the most of every ingredient. Pinto bean loaf with chili spice glaze was the Depression-era answer to meatloaf, and in some ways it was even better. You took whatever beans you had, pinto being the most common, mashed them with breadcrumbs, diced onions, and a few beaten eggs to bind it all together. Formed into a loaf shape and baked, it came out sturdy, sliceable, and surprisingly rich. But the real star was the glaze. Made from homemade chili sauce, usually a mix of tomato, vinegar, sugar, and spice, it got brushed over the top before baking and again just before serving. The edges caramelized, the flavors deepened, and every bite hit that sweet, salty, spicy mark that made you forget there was no meat at all. This loaf fed whole families and still left enough for sandwiches the next day. It was a miracle of thrift, taste, and ingenuity. In the right kitchen, with the right cook, it could be just as beloved as its beefy counterpart, maybe even more, because it stood for something more than just dinner. It stood for resilience, creativity, and full bellies in hard times. Homemade biscuits with gravy, a dish fit for a royal family or a very, very hungry family. Flour, baking powder, milk, and a little butter come together to create these golden biscuits that are the perfect vehicle for gravy. And don't get me started on the gravy. A little flour, fat, and some milk or broth whisked together created a rich, creamy sauce that turned biscuits into a hearty breakfast or dinner. Back in the day when the budget was tighter than ever, biscuits were practically a lifesaver, or at least a budget saver. They tasted even better if you had Sam's sausages or bacon sitting around, but even if you didn't, this meal was always a crowd pleaser. But whether you were serving them as a breakfast or a light dinner, these biscuits were going to keep your tummy happy and satisfied, and they hit just the right spot. This dish still to this day serves as a friendly reminder that a little can go a long way if prepared and served with love. Hamburger crumble over mashed potatoes felt like a backwards meatloaf, and that was exactly the point. Instead of baking everything together, Grandma browned the ground beef in a skillet, sometimes with onions, sometimes with just salt and pepper. Then she would whip up instant mashed potatoes or use leftovers from the night before. The beef went right on top, hot, greasy, and just barely seasoned, soaking into the potatoes like gravy. It was fast. It was easy. It was the kind of dinner you made when nobody could agree on anything but they all needed to eat. No ketchup glaze, no breadcrumbs, just the bare bones of a meat and potatoes meal. It was humble, but filling, messy, but comforting. And every now and then she would throw some peas on top or a handful of cheese. But even plain, it worked. It always worked. In homes where food had to stretch, this was one of the smartest tricks in the book. Hominy stew with lard and leftover pork was what happened when you had nothing but still needed something warm to fill a pot. Hominy, dried corn kernels treated with lye, was cheap, shelf-stable, and dense enough to stick with you for hours. It went into a big pot with water, a spoonful of lard for flavor and fat, and whatever pork trimmings you could find, bones, scraps, even rinds. As it simmered, the broth grew thicker, the hominy softened, and the pork let go of every bit of flavor it had left. You might add a bay leaf or some dried herbs if they were nearby, but you did not need them. This was peasant food at its best, simple, hearty, and deeply satisfying. It was the kind of dish that reminded you to be grateful for a roof and a hot meal. It stretched well, reheated even better, and left you full in a way only old food can. In a time when nothing came easy, hominy stew kept people going with its humble magic. Tomato juice and saltine cracker plates were a real thing, and not just when someone was sick. It was a quick supper, especially in the summer or when the kitchen felt too hot to touch. A cold glass of tomato juice poured straight from the can sat beside a stack of saltines and a wedge of cheese. That was the whole plate. No pan, no oven, no prep. Just cold, salty, sharp, and simple. It was a meal you could put together with one hand while holding a baby in the other. Some people dunked the crackers into the juice. Others spread the cheese and took slow bites. It was not much, but on nights when time was short and appetites were small, it was enough. And there was something oddly satisfying about it. Something clean, cool, and just familiar enough to bring a little peace to the end of the day. Hominy stew with lard and leftover pork was what happened when you had nothing but still needed something warm to fill a pot. Hominy, dried corn kernels treated with lye, was cheap, shelf-stable, and dense enough to stick with you for hours. It went into a big pot with water, a spoonful of lard for flavor and fat, and whatever pork trimmings you could find, bones, scraps, even rinds. As it simmered, the broth grew thicker, the hominy softened, and the pork let go of every bit of flavor it had left. You might add a bay leaf or some dried herbs if they were nearby, but you did not need them. This was peasant food at its best, simple, hearty, and deeply satisfying. It was the kind of dish that reminded you to be grateful for a roof and a hot meal. It stretched well, reheated even better, and left you full in a way only old food can. In a time when nothing came easy, hominy stew kept people going with its humble magic. Bulgur wheat pilaf with vegetables reflected the growing interest in health-conscious eating during the 1970s, but it was also an inexpensive way to make a filling meal. Bulgur was a grain that cooked quickly and absorbed flavors beautifully, making it a great base for sautéed onions, peppers, carrots, and sometimes a handful of herbs. It provided a nutty taste and a hearty texture, yet was much cheaper than meat-based dishes. This pilaf could be served as a main course for a light dinner or as a side dish to stretch more expensive proteins. Health food stores were becoming more common during this decade, and recipes like bulgur pilaf bridged the gap between nutrition and frugality. It could be made in large batches for just a few dollars, making it perfect for budget-minded families. The subtle flavors made it versatile, so leftovers could be repurposed into stuffed peppers or served cold as a salad. For those who wanted to eat well without spending much, bulgur wheat pilaf with vegetables proved that healthy and affordable could absolutely go hand in hand. Stuffed peppers. Forget those boring pre-made things you see at the grocery store because stuffed peppers are here to save the day. We're talking about the beautiful bell peppers Grandma made on Thanksgiving. Vibrant red, yellow, or orange peppers are hand-picked and carefully hollowed out and then stuffed with a flavorful mixture of fluffy rice, seasoned ground meat, and your choice of chopped vegetables. Once stuffed, these peppers are baked to perfection until they are tender and crisp. Now, this isn't just a casual meal. Whipping up a stuffed pepper might make you feel like a master chef in the kitchen. It's also a great way to use up leftover rice and ground meat. Bonus points. If you use their visual appeal to trick your children into getting their daily dose of veggies. Yeah, the little ones don't really go for the green peppers on the table, but they might just love these stuffed peppers. You might even add some cheese to top it off. Unfortunately, it is one of those dishes that has faded from many dinner tables. Not every seafood dish came from the ocean. Some came straight from a can. In a time when fresh shrimp was a luxury for coastal towns, canned shrimp offered an affordable way for working-class families to bring a little seafood into their diets. Mixed with peas in a thick, creamy white sauce and served over crackers or toast, this dish had a playful name, Shrimp Wiggle. But it was all business when it came to stretching ingredients. Canned shrimp had been around since the early 20th century, marketed as a convenient alternative to fresh shellfish. By the 1960s, it found its way into all kinds of home-cooked meals, from salads to casseroles. In this dish, it was combined with a simple white sauce, a budget-friendly staple made from butter, flour, and milk that turned just about anything into a filling, stick-to-your-ribs meal. The peas added a pop of color and a bit of sweetness, balancing out the richness of the sauce. Served over saltines or toasted white bread, it wasn't fancy, but it was warm, comforting, and familiar. For many kids, it was their first introduction to seafood, whether they liked it or not. Some remember it fondly, while others never quite warmed up to the idea of shrimp that came from a can. Duck and onion stew with a vinegar splash was not an everyday kind of dinner. It was a once-in-a-season kind of event. Duck was not something you bought. It was something you hunted, cleaned, and cooked with care. When duck season came around, farm families who lived near wetlands or rivers might get their hands on a few birds, and this stew was how you made the most of them. You would sear the duck pieces in a pot to render the fat, then toss in sliced onions until they turned soft and sweet. Water or broth came next, followed by a splash of vinegar. Apple cider if you had it, plain white if you did not. That vinegar gave it brightness, cutting through the richness of the meat. You would let it simmer low and slow until the duck was fall-apart tender and the onions melted into the broth. Served with bread or potatoes, it was as close to luxury as most families got. It was also a reminder of self-reliance, of seasons passing, of how closely food was tied to the land. You could not fake your way through this one. It took skill, time, and a bit of luck. Quick fruit and nut yogurt. Parfait was a quick and nutritious treat beloved in the 1960s for its simple assembly and delightful flavors. This parfait layered creamy yogurt with sweet canned fruits such as peaches or pineapple, along with a generous sprinkling of chopped nuts like walnuts or pecans. The combination provided a pleasing contrast between the smooth, tangy yogurt, the juicy fruit, and the crunchy texture of the nuts. Perfect for breakfast, a snack, or a light dessert, this recipe required minimal preparation time, fitting the era's demand for fast, wholesome meals. The canned fruit added a convenient sweetness that balanced the natural tartness of yogurt, while the nuts contributed protein and richness. This parfait was often served in clear glasses to showcase its colorful layers, making it visually appealing as well as tasty. Its popularity reflected the growing awareness of health and nutrition during the decade, along with a desire for fresh, easy-to-make dishes. While today's parfaits may include granola or fresh fruit, the classic 1960s fruit and nut yogurt parfait remains a nostalgic favorite, combining pantry staples into a satisfying and wholesome treat that anyone could whip up in moments. Long before store-bought bread was an everyday staple, cornmeal was the backbone of many working-class meals. Cheap, shelf-stable, and endlessly versatile, it found its way into countless recipes, none more practical than corn dodgers. These simple golden brown dumplings were either fried to crisp perfection or baked until firm, then served with a drizzle of syrup or a pat of butter. Corn dodgers were a direct descendant of Depression-era survival cooking, when wheat flour was too expensive for daily use. Cornmeal, on the other hand, was affordable and widely available, especially in the South and Midwest. Mixed with a little water, salt, and sometimes a splash of milk, it formed a dough sturdy enough to hold its shape in the frying pan. The result was a crispy on the outside, tender on the inside bite of pure comfort. Paired with a bit of molasses or honey, whatever was on hand, it became a meal that kids actually looked forward to. Some families made them dense and chewy, while others leaned toward a lighter, almost hush-puppy-like texture. However they were served, one thing was certain. Corn dodgers proved that even the simplest ingredients could be transformed into something satisfying. No frills, no waste, just good, honest food. Fried green tomato and onion sandwiches with mustard butter were what you made when the tomatoes refused to ripen. Green, firm, and tart, they were sliced thick, dredged in cornmeal and fried until golden. The onions, sweet and sharp, were grilled or pan-seared until soft, then layered on top. But the secret weapon was the mustard butter, a mix of softened butter, spicy mustard, and sometimes a pinch of sugar spread thick on toasted bread. This sandwich was loud, crispy, tangy, creamy, and bold. It was also a meal of defiance, a way to eat what was ready rather than wait for perfection. In farm kitchens, that kind of thinking was survival. You worked with what was in your hands. Green tomatoes have mostly become a novelty now, but back then, they were dinner. And this sandwich, messy, crunchy, unforgettable, was proof that sour could still satisfy. Gooey butter cake is arguably the top dog in terms of desserts and things to eat. People love it for two reasons. Gooey butter cake became a hit in the 1980s as a wallet-friendly dessert, perfect for potlucks, bake sales, or family gatherings. Its simple ingredients, flour, sugar, eggs, and a generous amount of butter, meant it was affordable to make and easy to share. During tough economic times, home bakers loved that this rich, indulgent cake would feed a crowd without breaking the bank. You couldn't beat that texture, and the buttery flavor is exactly what you need after a long shift in the summer heat. This cake is made with more butter than any doctor will say is safe for you, but the end result is just too delicious to pass up on. A lot of people seem to think that the dish's origins are rooted in German and Eastern European immigrants that first came on over and settled down in St. Louis. It's actually so deeply associated with the area that the other name for this dish is the St. Louis Gooey Butter Cake. It really lives up to that name too, because that gooey filling on the inside is nothing short of heavenly. It's something that tourists stop in the area for and try all the time, and the locals just can't ever seem to get enough of it. Cornbread and pinto beans was a meal deeply rooted in Southern cooking that found its way into frugal kitchens across America during the 1970s. Pinto beans simmered slowly with onions, salt, and maybe just a scrap of ham or bacon for richness were served alongside or spooned over wedges of golden cornbread. The beans provided hearty protein and a savory earthiness, while the cornbread brought sweetness and a crumbly texture that made every bite satisfying. Cooking the beans low and slow allowed them to develop a depth of flavor that paired beautifully with the slightly crisp edges of skillet-baked cornbread. The dish was incredibly inexpensive, feeding a family for pennies and offering leftovers that were just as good reheated the next day. Many households considered this the ultimate comfort meal, perfect for cold evenings when something simple yet filling was needed. Butter melting into a hot slice of cornbread next to a steaming bowl of beans was a humble pleasure that carried generations of tradition. More than just a meal, it was a reminder of resourcefulness, resilience, and the beauty of making something wonderful from basic, affordable ingredients. Leftover rice with creamed spinach was one of those pantry meals that turned odds and ends into something filling, warm, and fast. You scooped leftover rice into a skillet, stirred in canned creamed spinach, and added a splash of milk or cheese if you had any left. Everything cooked together until hot, and that was dinner. It was creamy, salty, and just filling enough to count when there was not much else in the cupboard. These little skillet meals showed up in old cookbooks because they stretched groceries, made dinner happen fast, and kept families full during lean times. You could eat it plain, add black pepper, or even crack an egg on top if you wanted to feel fancy, but most folks just scooped it onto a plate and called it a night. This meal did not take much: leftovers, canned greens, and a little creativity, and somehow it got everyone fed. Funny how these quick, practical dinners stick with you long after times get easier. Garlic-scented, spicy, and elegantly minimal, this Italian treasure draws hungry fans with its impressive simplicity. Canned chicken hash was how you made a hot, filling dinner happen when all you had was pantry scraps and a few minutes to spare. You popped open a can of shredded chicken, fried it in a skillet with some chopped onions, and tossed in leftover mashed potatoes or canned potatoes if you had them. Everything crisped up around the edges, browned in the pan, and came together into something that looked decent and filled your stomach fast. Old cookbooks leaned hard on meals like this because they were cheap, quick, and made sure nothing went to waste. Chicken hash might not sound glamorous, but in homes where leftovers were gold, it was a lifesaver. You could top it with a fried egg or spoon a little gravy over it if you were lucky, but most folks ate it just as it was, hot, salty, and good enough to count. This was dinner that made the best of what you had, and back in those days, that meant everything. Funny how meals like this stuck around even when fancier options showed up. Sometimes the fast, familiar ones were the best. Not cold ham loaf with spiced apple rings and gelatin salad was Sunday lunch without the oven. The ham loaf, pink, pressed, and slightly sweet, was sliced thin and served cold, like a meatloaf that never saw heat. Alongside it came apple rings, spiced with cinnamon and clove, stewed until they were tender and fragrant like pie filling. The gelatin salad sat trembling in its mold, packed with shreds of carrot or bits of celery, sweet and strange and somehow expected. This was a plate you saw on pastel-colored plastic trays, or at church gatherings with mismatched forks. White bread on the side, maybe a thick smear of yellow mustard, and a pickle spear for punctuation. It was cooling food for hot kitchens, a way to serve something that felt full without ever lighting the stove. Ham loaf has all but vanished, and gelatin salads are more joke than joy these days. But for those who grew up with them, this was the taste of a summer table. Cold plates, quiet fans, and nowhere to be but home. Cheese-topped rice ring turned plain rice into an eye-catching centerpiece that delighted both family members and guests while keeping costs low. Cooked rice was mixed with beaten eggs and lightly seasoned before being pressed into a greased ring mold and baked until firm. After unmolding, the golden rice ring was filled with a medley of creamed vegetables such as peas, carrots, or spinach, then topped with a scattering of melted cheese for a touch of richness. This presentation gave the appearance of a special occasion dish despite relying on everyday pantry staples. Home cooks enjoyed how flexible the recipe was, allowing them to use leftover vegetables or whatever cheese they had available. It provided a balanced meal of grains, vegetables, and dairy while remaining budget-friendly and easy to prepare ahead of time. For generations, baked cod was a dependable, no-fuss dinner, particularly in coastal and New England households. Light, flaky, and mild in flavor, cod was one of the most affordable fish available, making it a practical choice for families looking to put a nutritious meal on the table without overspending. Topped with a crisp breadcrumb and herb crust, this dish was both simple and satisfying, proof that great cooking didn't need to be complicated. Cod's popularity was tied to its abundance. Throughout much of the 20th century, fresh or frozen cod was readily available at grocery stores and fish markets, and it didn't require elaborate preparation. A coating of breadcrumbs, butter, and fresh herbs locked in moisture while creating a crunchy golden brown topping. Baked rather than fried, this dish had a lighter texture, making it a favorite among those who wanted something hearty without being heavy. So why did it disappear? Overfishing led to shortages, making cod more expensive, and as frozen fish sticks and pre-breaded fillies flooded supermarkets, many home cooks stopped preparing fish from scratch. Chicken and mushroom cream bake was one of the many dishes that showcased the growing reliance on canned soups in 1950s kitchens. Housewives layered chicken pieces with canned mushroom soup and baked everything together until creamy and tender. The result was a rich, satisfying dinner that felt indulgent without requiring complicated preparation. Children enjoyed the smooth, savory sauce, while adults valued its convenience and affordability. The use of canned soup made the dish quick to prepare, fitting neatly into the post-war embrace of modern convenience foods. Community cookbooks and advertisements promoted recipes like this as symbols of efficiency and comfort. It reflected the era's tendency to blend practicality with indulgence, making the most of pantry staples while still delivering satisfying meals. Chicken and mushroom cream bake became one of the quintessential 1950s dinners, remembered fondly as a dish that combined thrift, convenience, and comfort in one creamy, crowd-pleasing casserole. Egg drop soup for some royal courts was a show of a chef's skill. In 1930, America the Soup became a beloved soup of the masses who were struggling to make an honest paycheck. Bread from last night and eggs beaten so thoroughly that the preparation itself doubled as a forearm workout resulted in an incredibly rich soup. Sometimes, if a home cook felt particularly fancy, they would have chicken either boiled or shredded in the mix. Using the chicken stock was also a common way to not let anything go to waste, since getting the most bang for your buck out of poultry became a habit of everyone. Most would just have this with eggs and throw in some ginger, chives, and olives or anchovies. We would definitely like to see this make a comeback with a less cost-oriented version that really explores the dish. An herb biscuit pie delivered layers of savory aroma and flaky texture while using only basic pantry ingredients. Sliced onions were slowly caramelized with butter and a handful of fresh or dried herbs until sweet and fragrant, then spread in a baking dish and topped with soft biscuit dough. As the pie baked, the onion filling bubbled up and mingled with the biscuits, creating a rich sauce beneath a golden crust. The combination offered a satisfying balance of sweetness from the onions and earthiness from herbs such as thyme or parsley. Because onions were inexpensive and stored well, this recipe quickly became a go-to for frugal households seeking warmth and flavor without expensive meats. It could be served as a vegetarian main dish or as a hearty side for roasted vegetables, making it adaptable to whatever else was on hand. Onion and herb biscuit pie captures the resourceful creativity of mid-century cooks, proving that even the simplest staples can become a centerpiece when treated with care and patience in the oven. Next on our list, we have boiled beans with garlic, which was an incredible staple across Europe, especially among monks and peasants. While peasants liked it because it was one of the few affordable things that they could get, monks liked them because of the sheer simplicity and health benefits. It kind of makes me feel really bad about how much unnecessary junk I eat when I do videos like this. These beans were one of the primary legumes that would be grown in medieval fields, and one of the most common ones were fava beans. These had become pretty native to the Old World, and they were even older than much of the beans we use today, like pinto, kidney, or black beans. Fava beans were incredibly resistant and tough, and they could work through the winter very well. They also did amazing whenever you would mix them in with garlic. It was one of the most affordable seasoning plants, and it could grow in climates that were otherwise too rough to support much crop growth. People kept it for medicinal purposes, as a flavoring, and as a last resort meal too. It was very common for Italian dishes in that era to feature sage, olive oil, and garlic as primary ingredients in most dishes. Monastic communities also relied on boiled beans and garlic as it became a particularly good friend in their endeavor to sustain meatless diets forever. Fried chicken and rice baked with cream soup was a casserole that could turn just a couple of chicken pieces into a meal large enough to feed the whole family. Raw rice was combined in a baking dish with cream of mushroom or cream of chicken soup, water, and simple seasonings. The chicken was placed on top, and the whole dish baked until the meat was tender and the rice had absorbed all the creamy, savory flavor. This hands-off cooking method made it a favorite for busy weeknights, while its affordability made it a reliable choice for families keeping a close eye on grocery bills. Using a single casserole dish also meant less cleanup afterward, which only added to its appeal. Leftovers reheated well, making it ideal for packing into lunch containers the next day. Many variations existed, with some cooks adding vegetables like peas or carrots directly into the rice for a complete one-pan dinner. Whether served at the kitchen table on a weeknight or brought to a potluck chicken and rice bake was dependable, filling, and comforting. It embodied the idea that good food didn't need to be complicated, expensive, or labor-intensive to be deeply satisfying. Sour cream and onion-fried cabbage cakes were born from boredom. You can only eat boiled cabbage so many ways before you start to rebel, even during rationing. So clever hands found a way to reinvent the leftover greens, chopped finely, mixed with mashed potatoes, onion, and a scoop of sour cream, then pan-fried until crisp and golden. What emerged was somewhere between a latke and a hush puppy, tender in the middle and whispering with steam. These little cakes were served plain with applesauce or next to whatever protein was available, though they could hold their own as a meal. You could smell them cooking from outside the house, especially in winter when anything fried seemed like a gift from the heavens. These days, cabbage has gone back to being either raw in salads or lost in a soup pot. But once, it was the star of the skillet, crisping in bacon grease and proving that even leftovers could become legends. Another one you might be surprised to see in a video about medieval-era recipes is honey and oat cakes. Oats were really common in northern and western regions like Ireland, Scandinavia, and Scotland, and this was because the climate was really cold. It was much easier to grow them than, let's say, wheat. Oats were something that would thrive in poor soils, and they also had shorter growing seasons, which meant that they became a pristine source of food when times were tough and you were running low in your pantry. A very basic oat cake would typically be made from coarsely ground oatmeal, water, and some salt, and this mix would be made into a slightly hard dough, rolled very thin, and then cooked on a baking stone. These were durable, portable, and crispy, so they were the perfect meal for long journeys. Alongside some honey, which was the primary sweetener before sugar, it was one of the best meals you could have for celebrations. While people did use them in their daily lives, rural peasants most often got to enjoy them during festivals and religious holidays in monasteries. It's also interesting to note that honey was seen as a bounty of the earth that carried divine favor, and so honey and oat cakes were seen as a good blessing for wedding feasts. Fruit Jell-O with cottage cheese was a nostalgic dessert that combined the sweetness and jiggly texture of flavored gelatin with the creamy, mild tang of cottage cheese. This recipe involved layering or mixing prepared fruit-flavored gelatin with cottage cheese and often included chunks of fresh or canned fruit to add texture and flavor. It was popular in mid-century American households for its bright appearance and ease of preparation. Fruit Jell-O with cottage cheese appealed to families looking for a light, refreshing dessert that required minimal effort and used readily available ingredients. The dish reflected the era's fascination with molded gelatin desserts, which were often served at family gatherings and holiday meals. Its combination of sweet and creamy elements offered a pleasing contrast that made it memorable and comforting. This dessert remains a charming example of vintage American cuisine that continues to evoke fond memories. Oven-broiled ham and cheese on rye was Grandma's way of making fast food feel like real food. She would pull out slices of rye bread, sometimes fresh, sometimes a little dry, and line them up on a baking sheet. Deli ham came next, folded neatly or just torn straight from the package. Then she laid down thick slices of Swiss cheese, the kind that bubbled up when it melted and turned brown around the corners. Into the broiler it went for just a few minutes. You had to watch it close. Blink too long and it would burn. But when it was done just right, the cheese was molten, the rye was crisp, and the ham was warmed through with that perfect salty edge. The smell filled the whole kitchen. Kids came running. Adults stopped what they were doing. It was hot, fast, and easy to eat with your hands. Some people added a smear of mustard. Others topped it with a tomato slice or pickles. But most of the time, it needed nothing at all. It was simple food that felt like a treat, the kind of meal that made an ordinary evening feel a little more special. Cheese and pickle toasties offered a warm, tangy snack that was a common fixture in vintage American cookbooks. These toasties combined melted cheese with pickles, sandwiched between slices of bread and grilled or toasted until golden and bubbly. The contrasting flavors of creamy cheese and sharp pickles created a satisfying balance that made this snack appealing across age groups. Quick to assemble and easy to cook, cheese and pickle toasties became a favorite when a simple yet flavorful snack was needed without fuss. The recipe's enduring popularity stemmed from its use of accessible ingredients and the way it elevated basic staples into a tasty treat. These toasties often brought a sense of nostalgia, reminding many of afternoons spent at home or school with comforting homemade snacks. They exemplify how mid-century cooks combined familiar flavors in straightforward ways to deliver maximum enjoyment with minimal effort. The warm, crispy exterior and gooey filling remain a hallmark of this beloved classic. Rye pancakes are a fantastic option to go for if you have a family of 4 and live in prehistoric times. They were one of the most common recipes, despite what you might be thinking. These people were still walking around wearing chainmail armor and robes, so how'd they end up having pancakes? Well, they're actually pretty different from the kinds of pancakes we're used to today. These are just rye flour, water, some salt, and that's it. It makes a batter that can be ladled, but most people would typically just pour it onto a griddle or a hot stone suspended over a hearth. This was the most common way to cook desserts or breakfast in these times. If you were lucky enough to have milk or buttermilk, you could replace the water with that, and it would usually make them a bit more tender. People typically fried these in butter or animal fat. Well, if it wasn't a fasting day. Rye usually does not need to be flavored much, but what flavorings people did use, they were very different from what we have today. People used stewed vegetables, onions and garlic instead of Miracle Whip, rainbow sprinkles and maple syrup. 10-minute pasta aglio e olio soared in popularity thanks to its swift cooking time, making it ideal for busy households yearning for full-bodied flavor. Historians trace its roots to Naples, where garlic, oil, and chili flakes found their way into countless frugal suppers, proving that even minimal ingredients can create culinary magic. Enthusiasts often joke that this one-pot wonder is proof you don't need a full Italian culinary degree to impress guests, though precision in cooking pasta al dente remains key. Simplicity and accessibility shine through as garlic-infused olive oil blankets each strand, introducing a subtle heat that blends beautifully with the starchy richness. Nostalgia lingers because generations have embraced it as an homage to rustic Italian peasant cooking, where fancy sauces take a back seat to wholesome foundations. For those keeping an eye on speed, a 10-minute cook time makes this enticing for weeknight dinners, unexpected guests, or even late-night cravings. For soldiers on the march, portability was everything, and few foods were as reliable as bread and cheese. Roman legionnaires famously carried flat loaves of bread and wedges of hard cheese, often made from sheep or goat's milk. The combination was a nutritional powerhouse, carbs for energy and protein for strength, all in a package that could survive the harsh conditions of a campaign. But let's not romanticize it. The bread was often dense and tough, more akin to a brick than a baguette. Soldiers sometimes had to soak it in water or wine just to make it chewable. The cheese wasn't the creamy delight you'd find at a deli. Aged for durability, it leaned more toward rock-hard than velvety soft. Still, when paired together, they made a meal that was surprisingly satisfying and, most importantly, long-lasting. In medieval times, knights and foot soldiers kept the tradition alive, carrying wheels of cheese and hearty loaves during long marches. Back then, breaking bread wasn't just a saying, it was a literal act of survival. Sure, it wasn't gourmet, but when the choice is between stale bread and hunger, even a Roman would tell you, the bread wins every time. Hamburger corn pone pie was a true budget stretcher's delight in the 1950s, layering hearty ground beef and vegetables beneath a cornbread crust. It was a clever way to transform two basic staples into something that felt like a complete meal. The filling often included onions, beans, or canned tomatoes, all of which were inexpensive and easy to find. Cornbread mix or homemade corn pone batter was poured over the top, then baked until golden and crisp. When it came out of the oven, the combination of savory beef and sweet cornbread created an aroma that filled the kitchen with comfort. Families found it an ideal way to feed hungry children after long days of school or play without breaking the bank. The pie could also be stretched further by adding extra vegetables, ensuring no one left the table hungry. This dish showed the ingenuity of homemakers who knew how to turn modest ingredients into meals that still felt like a treat. It became a thrifty and dependable option across countless American homes. The tasty meat pie isn't your average store-bought pie. We're talking about a savory masterpiece filled with delicious goodness. This used to be a classic at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners back in the day before hash brown casseroles came to take the cake. But tasty meat pies had their own beauty. Imagine a flaky golden brown crust with a filling of seasoned ground meat, chopped vegetables like carrots and peas, and a rich, flavorful gravy. The origins of the meat pie have been traced back to the Neolithic period around 6000 BC. Yeah, even the Egyptians were a fan of this classic. It's perfect for a potluck, a family dinner, or even a cozy night in. The best part? Its portability. Just grab a slice and head out the door. It's the ultimate dinner on the go. Old-fashioned succotash was a blend of corn and lima beans that seemed almost too simple, yet it was beloved in the 1950s. The two ingredients were sautéed together in butter or drippings until tender and lightly seasoned. The sweetness of the corn paired perfectly with the creamy texture of the beans, creating a dish that felt both hearty and fresh. It was often served as a side dish but could be eaten on its own when meat was scarce. Many families grew corn and beans in backyard gardens, so succotash was a natural choice for thrifty households. The dish had roots in Native American cooking, but became a symbol of rustic comfort in mid-century America. Children liked it because of its mild sweetness, while adults appreciated how inexpensive and filling it was. Succotash represented the best of 1950s resourcefulness, turning two simple crops into a staple that people still remember fondly today. Chipped beef and cream over fried grit cakes was a Southern solution to a national problem. During World War II, meat was rationed, and frugality ruled every kitchen. Chipped beef, dried, salty slivers of preserved beef, was a staple in both military rations and rural homes. Rehydrated in a skillet with cream, butter, and a little black pepper, it became a thick, rich gravy that could dress up anything. Instead of toast, farmers in the South used fried grit cakes, leftover grits chilled in a pan, sliced into squares, and crisped in bacon fat until golden. The result was crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and perfect for soaking up that creamy meat sauce. This dish was known by many names, some polite, some not. But it was beloved all the same. It made something out of nothing. A handful of meat, a little milk, and yesterday's grits became a breakfast or supper that stuck to your bones. Chipped beef may be harder to find now, and grit cakes have been replaced by packaged everything. But this was food that made the most of what you had, and never apologized for it. Which cheap dinner from your grandparents' table would you bring back tonight? Tell us in the comments. Hit like and subscribe so we can keep preserving the suppertime recipes that carried American families through the hardest years.